Chapter 221, Bonus Points. How could a lord not even know his own external trade routes? Didn't he come with you? Ecthelion shot back. Leeway thought for a moment. Unlikely. I came all the way south from River Valley City, through the Black Gate in northern Mordor. Only someone like him could pass there. Anyone else would have been torn apart by the orcs. Mordor's orcs didn't care who was passing. Sometimes even their own people paid a toll if their caravan lacked a strong captain. All right. Leeway let the subject drop. If they had managed to get through, they had their reasons. Where are they? I want to see them. In the northern market on the first level. I'll be right back. He briefly excused himself and on his elytra, then leaped from the top level. Ecthelion and Sengel rushed to the railing, craned their necks, and a firework crack sounded as Leeway shot skyward. Swift as an eagle, one of them murmured. They exchanged a look. 1 second later, when they blinked, Leeway had vanished. Are those wings? No, it looks more like a split piece of cloth. How does he fly with that? Maybe it's magic. That would explain it. Ecthelion watched the cloudless path where Leeway had flown and thought of the gray-robed wizard. Perhaps a word to him might do the trick. Down in the market, Leeway navigated the crowd and quickly found his target. A flag flew high above a central cart, plain, bearing only a name, Leeway. He had signed that banner himself years ago. The cart was surrounded by an impenetrable mass of people. No wonder Ecthelion had complained about shopping here. This caravan was absurdly popular. Everyone in the market had gathered, and the other stall owners were nowhere to be seen. With no time to lose, Leeway sighed and pushed into the press. Excuse me, make way. Standing at the edge, he waved and called, forcing his way inward. Thanks to his netherite alloy armor, he didn't budge when the crowd pressed back. He moved through them like a mountain. Who's pushing from behind? Queue up, or I'll put my vegetable basket on your head. Oh goodness, please, you first. An old woman shouting at the rear spun around and nearly had a heart attack. She had been a little too forward, but the person she was scolding simply steadied her, preventing her from falling. When she recovered, she couldn't stop smiling. She'd brushed his armor. Sorry, forgive me. I need to get in. No problem. Go ahead. As soon as people recognized him, the front ranks parted. The market fell quiet for a beat until Leeway climbed onto one of the freight carts. Then the noise swelled back to life. Lord Leeway. The caravan leader saw him approach and hurried over. I never expected you'd come this far. Leeway surveyed the cargo with mild pleasure. The cart held an array of specialties from roadside fort, far more than his backpack and ender chest combined could hold. We heard news that you were on the road a few days back, the leader said. We didn't expect you'd be here in person. The leader was gratified and a little stunned. Meeting their elusive lord by chance was not something he had dared expect. I'm Charlie, leader of the first caravan. Greetings. You've worked hard. How did you get here? No hardship, Lord. We followed the main road. Our apprentice ranger team scouted ahead, and the Wanderer's instructor led them in clearing potential dangers. They did most of the hard work. At that moment, 2 young men came running up, energetic and eager. Apprentice rangers, Alj and Arwen, greet you. They bowed and beamed with the unfiltered enthusiasm of youth. Leeway smiled and clapped them on the shoulders. How's your internship going? Any trouble? The 2 lit up. We met a wight and almost died in the woods near the ancient tomb, Lord. The first enemy we ran into was really tough. We tried everything and couldn't beat it. They babbled the story out, sheltering from the rain in a village, finding a cursed child, discovering the wight and chasing it off, and finally Instructor Falodon arriving to save them. If only we'd known, one of them said. I should have warned you, Leeway said, chuckling. Wights aren't something ordinary folk should tangle with. Instructor Falodon told us that later. Next time, we won't take them on unless there are at least 5 of us. That's sensible. Even then, stay alert. Never let your guard down for a moment. Yes, Lord. The 2 memorized the advice like gospel. By the way, why are you with the caravan? Aren't you supposed to be getting your internship evaluated right now? Our internship is finished, Alja said. Under the instructors, we were in more than a dozen raids and direct engagements over the past months. We've seen battles big and small. The orcs on South Ridge have been wiped out. Later, we met this caravan on the Green Road. They hadn't been this way before and needed guides. So we came along. Two young rangers who knew the southern Eriador routes, together with the caravan's permanent guard and the covert protection of the wanderers and other apprentice rangers, made a safe passage possible. Roadside Fort's influence didn't extend beyond Eriador, and what lay beyond the lonely land was uncertain, but these two had risked enough, facing a wight to save a cursed child, fighting alongside the wanderers in over a dozen skirmishes, then guiding a caravan through dangerous stretches all the way to Gondor. Li Wei waved. Well done, Aljay and Arwen. I'll give you bonus points when you return. Thank you, Lord Li Wei, the two shouted at the top of their lungs, ecstatic. Chapter 222, The Infamous King of Rohan. We followed the north-south road, passed through Shabard, crossed Harad, the Black Land, and then went over Isengard and down the southern road of Rohan, all the way to the capital of Gondor. Two apprentice rangers from Roadside Fort left cheerfully, followed by Charlie, the caravan leader, who reported to Li Wei. The first half of the journey was smooth until we reached Harad. A band of dark-eyed men stopped us there. They were dressed in animal hides and carried stone spears and axes. They suddenly leapt out from both sides of the road, trying to spook the lead horses, but Roadside Fort's horses aren't easily frightened. Still, they came in such numbers that we had to stop. They completely blocked the road. Just as our guards had drawn their weapons and a fight seemed inevitable, an old man in white appeared. He called himself Saruman and asked me to give his regards to you. That Saruman held those Haradrim back. In the end, they didn't attack us. They even escorted us all the way to the Isen crossing and only left when we reached the Rohan border. Charlie sighed with admiration. Our lord is evidently well known wherever he goes. Li Wei murmured the name Harad, but the important part was Saruman. So he'd already begun to make alliances this early. Something was starting. Saruman is indeed an ally now, Li Wei said. Now he is? Charlie seized on the key point of Li Wei's words. He still sounded cautious. He continued his report. Rohan was fine at first. The people welcomed us. They liked our cider and woolen goods. Then we reached the capital, Edoras. Charlie's face tightened. What happened in Edoras? My lord, he began, I don't want to speak ill of a ruler, but the conduct of the king of Rohan is hard to put into words. Speak plainly. Li Wei gave him the permission Charlie needed. Don't overthink it. I'm here. That was enough to steady Charlie. At first, our trade in Edoras went well. Then the king heard about us. He brought a large number of soldiers and surrounded our caravan. He questioned our prices. I swear they were fair. Our goods were priced nearly the same as in Gondor, and the quality was much better. But that king accused us of being black marketeers, people trying to disrupt the local market. He wanted to seize our goods, confiscate our guards' weapons, and even take our horses. We were almost forced to walk home. Oh, Li Wei swung his legs and sat sideways on the cart, tapping the wooden board with his fingers. Sengel's father, he thought to himself. This was simply trying to get things for free. It wasn't far from outright robbery. And the people of Rohan, how did they react? They were furious, Charlie said. Not at us, but at their king. I'm certain we'd done nothing illegal. We'd learned the local rules before traveling there and followed them strictly. I know the ways of Rohan's king. This wasn't your fault, Li Wei said. Greed like that shouldn't have a bottom. From Charlie's expression, however, it didn't look like the caravan's goods had been confiscated. No, my lord, Charlie continued. A Rohan marshal saw your signature on our caravan's flag and strongly advised the king to let us go. Several cavalry captains then came to counsel him together. At that moment, the atmosphere was tense. I thought the captains might mutiny. Under their persuasion, the king finally let us leave. We didn't dare stay in Rohan after that and hurried out. Even though the caravan guards were elites and their gear rivaled the elven regulars, they were few in number. A large army or even a small cavalry unit would pose a grave threat. No one wanted to gamble. I understand, Li Wei said, filing the matter away. A new route would need to be planned. All right, now that you're here, rest. Gondor is a formal ally, and I'm just about to have dinner with some friends here. May you enjoy your meal, Charlie replied. With Li Wei's assurance, Charlie finally relaxed and set his people to selling the remaining goods. Li Wei took a few provisions and a barrel of Roadside Fort's special wine for the evening and left. A brief crackle of celebration sounded as he climbed up to the top floor to meet Ecthelion and Sengel. "I brought some good things from the caravan," he called as he entered the banquet hall. He produced the wine from his pack, one barrel of each kind the caravan had brought. Before the modest banquet began, both Ecthelion and Sengel had brought their families to meet Li Wei, including Denethor. Even Sengel's newly weaned daughter was brought forward. To the little one, still too young to speak, Li Wei offered a small silver ornament from Roadside Fort as a gift. "She'll like this," he said. Sengel's young wife bowed slightly in gratitude on the child's behalf, her bearing graceful and composed. Her dark hair and tall stature made her stand out. Her lineage was notable. Sengel had introduced her before. Her name was Moen, and she carried some high Númenórean blood, in other words, Dunedain ancestry. That showed in their children, who were taller than the usual Rohirrim and bore darker hair. "A small gift to show my sincerity," Li Wei said. Moen smiled and replied, "Anything from your hand is worth more than any other treasure." It was easy to imagine that whenever her daughter grew and attended gatherings, no matter how much gold or how many pearls people displayed, they would not dare outshine that simple silver trinket. In the presence of such a personal, unassuming gift, wealth alone had no meaning. Chapter 223, Fair and Square. Seeing the neighbor's uncle's daughter receive a gift, Denethor glanced over with longing. As soon as he met Li Wei's scrutinizing gaze, he quickly turned away, trying to look indifferent. Li Wei smiled, bypassed the interesting young man for the moment, and walked straight to Sengel and Ecthelion. He produced 2 golden apples. "These are?" Ecthelion breathed. They were flawless, glowing fruits, treasures of rare beauty. "Golden apples," Li Wei said. "They're fashioned from a great deal of gold. They're edible and have restorative and protective powers. If someone's heart is pierced but they aren't quite dead, these can bring them back." Ecthelion and Sengel stared, stunned. Such things were beyond precious. A chancellor's heir and a Rohan prince both widened their eyes. It seemed almost impossible, yet it was true. "I present these 2 apples to you," Li Wei said. "I hope they might be of use." "These are true heirlooms," Ecthelion said solemnly as he accepted a golden apple. "They shall be kept as family treasures and only used when life itself is at stake." Sengel took his apple with a bow as well. Ecthelion felt a twinge of unease. His father had already offered a symbolic, mithril-tinged short sword in repayment for Li Wei's kindness. Now Li Wei had given something far more valuable in return, another impossible-to-refuse favor added to their debt. He stowed the golden apple carefully and made a mental note. After the gifts were given, Li Wei left the banquet hall. Everyone assumed he had gone to the kitchen, as earlier agreed, but that wasn't the case. Outside the hall, in a quiet spot, he set down an ender chest and unpacked an enchanting table, bookshelves, lapis lazuli, and an anvil. He forged an iron sword on the spot and began to enchant it. The scrolls flipped, the lapis flared into streaks of light and merged into the blade. The sword's attributes appeared: durability 3, Bane of Arthropods 4. "Damn," Li Wei muttered. Bane of Arthropods was an unlucky enchantment given the current enemies, mostly orcs and humans, where sharpness would have been far more useful. Still, he rolled with it. He enchanted a few books and, by chance, got another Bane of Arthropods 4. He combined the books to push the sword's Bane of Arthropods to level V, then applied a mending book stored in the ender chest. Now he had a sturdy iron sword, specialized for dispatching undead. Li Wei himself didn't need it. His ancient elven blessing, the broad evil slayer effect on his nemesis weapon, already countered all evil beings, including the undead. This sword was not for him. He packed everything up and headed back to the reception hall. In a corner of the hall, Denethor leaned against the wall, mood sour. He watched his parents and the next-door uncle's family chatting happily and felt cut off from their joy. And there was one child who hadn't received a gift: him. Had Li Wei taken a disliking to him? He frowned and replayed every interaction with Li Wei since their first meeting. Nothing stood out. If anything might have offended him, it was challenging Li Wei at their first meeting, but he'd been soundly beaten. Wasn't courage shown by confronting the strong, not by picking on the weak? His father had taught him that true bravery wasn't about attacking the helpless. The gloom deepened, a small bitter anger rising. Just as the resentment was about to take hold, Denethor's expression cleared. He remembered a storybook fable he'd once read. A generous gentleman gave gifts to everyone but one person. That person nursed a grudge despite having no real complaint. What kind of man would he be to hold such a petty grudge? He laughed inwardly and cast the sulks aside. A heavy hand patting his shoulder made him jump. Li Wei stood beside him, having appeared silently. "You look troubled," Li Wei observed. "I thought you might be upset." "Why would I be upset?" Denethor answered with forced stubbornness, then managed a small smile. Li Wei handed him the freshly enchanted iron sword. "You lack nothing precious, child," he said. "So I'll give you an iron sword I made myself. It's not as sharp as an elven blade, nor as finely wrought as a dwarven weapon, just a standard iron sword, sturdy and reliable. I give it to you. May your will be like iron, never yielding." Denethor stared at the blade. For a moment there seemed to be a faint, elusive glow along its edge that vanished whenever he looked directly at it. He received it with a solemn nod. "I will keep it with me always." Smoke began to rise from the back kitchen. Li Wei had synthesized a number of cooking pots and set to work, using the caravan's abundant ingredients to produce plate after plate of local specialties and exotic dishes. The cooks assisting him watched, wide-eyed, as he moved through frying, stir-frying, boiling, stewing, and deep-frying with practiced ease. After so many times, he could perform the steps without relying on any synthesis prompts. At this informal family-style banquet, the two families sampled Li Wei's rarely mentioned culinary talents. "These techniques are fresh, almost a new school," one of the cooks marveled. Good food needed good wine. Ecthelion and Sengel drank more freely, and conversation flowed. It was then Li Wei mentioned what Charlie, the caravan leader, had told him. "I don't like keeping things from my friends," he said to Sengel. "There's something I need to tell you." "Go on," Sengel said, listening intently. "Your father, Fengel, the king of Rohan, tried to forcibly detain the roadside fort caravan some time ago and seize all their goods," Li Wei said plainly. "I intend to go to him and make him see his mistake. This is my announcement. I'll do it regardless. Consider this advanced notice so you know what I'm about to do." Sengel slammed his hand down on the table, clearly moved. The sudden noise drew glances from everyone in the room. "May I join you?" he asked, voice ringing with conviction. Chapter 224, Disguise Operation. Some people were decisive. They made a decision in a single instant and set off the next. That night, two figures galloped out of the White City, racing across the Great Plains. At the same time, Ecthelion sought out his father, Turgon, and showed him the golden apple. "Does it truly work?" he asked. A golden apple that would neither rot nor fail to save a life was, by any measure, appearance, material, or efficacy, an object of great value. Even from the perspective of the ruler of Middle-earth's most powerful human kingdom, it was a treasure. "Yes, father," Ecthelion said. "I believe Lord Li Wei would not lie." Turgon took the apple gently from his son. As his hand closed around it, the weight of the thing seemed to press on his chest. The apple, beautiful and terrible, felt heavy in every sense. "You keep it," he said after a long moment. Ecthelion hesitated, then set the apple into a small custom box. It was placed somewhere safe. After a pause, Turgon asked, "I heard you held a small banquet. How was it? Was it pleasant?" "Very relaxing," Ecthelion replied. "Li Wei showed us his culinary skill. The food was exquisite. Sengel and I even drank a little more than we should." "That's good," Turgon said, nodding. "Where is our friend now?" "If convenient, I'll visit him again tomorrow," Ecthelion answered. "He is no longer here, father," Ecthelion added. "When did he leave?" "Just now. As soon as the gathering ended, he dragged Sengel out with him. They should be outside the city by now." "What did he say he was going to do?" Ecthelion hesitated, uncertain how to phrase it. "He said he was going to give the king of Rohan a good beating." Sengel agreed to go along. Turgon was silent for a moment, then murmured, "You are a dutiful son." By night's end, with dawn just touching the horizon, Li Wei and Sengel had crossed the Merlin River, the boundary between Gondor and Rohan, and were officially in Rohan's lands. Dew beaded the tall grasses, occasional drops slid down, rhymed with a thin dusting of frost by the horses' hooves. "Are we really just going to walk all the way?" Sengel complained. Li Wei glanced over his shoulder. What else? You can't fly. Sengel wrapped tighter in a heavy cloak, his head and face covered so only his eyes showed. To anyone passing, he might have looked like a bandit or someone who had seen trouble and wanted to hide. Can we rest a bit? He asked, out of breath. I'm short on air. That's your fault, Li Wei said, but he stopped the horses and built a small fire. He hung a pot over it and from a patch of rotten wood nearby, picked 2 mushrooms. He intended to make a simple stew, mushrooms and meat. Sengel peered at the fungi warily. That mushroom looks almost too bright. The cut surface changes color. Are you sure it's edible? Li Wei smiled and tossed the washed mushrooms into the pot. Don't worry, I've eaten it before. Well, that's reassuring, Sengel conceded. A savory aroma rose from the pot. Even just this bowl of soup makes last night feel worthwhile, Sengel said as he accepted the bowl Li Wei handed him. He drank slowly at first, then faster. This mushroom with meat, delicious. I've memorized the recipe. Mind if I teach it to my family? It's a shame they can't taste something like this. Go ahead, Li Wei said. If you can make it, then make it. Sengel finished the first bowl in a few gulps and, ignoring the steam, served himself another. He leaned back and exhaled, feeling comforted in a way he hadn't in a long time. He almost felt like he was on a picnic. For a few minutes he was content, until a handful of tiny black specks on the horizon drew closer. Sengel snapped the bowl down and pulled his cloak and scarf tighter. The vibration of hooves approached. A group of cavalry broke off from the main road and circled them, spears leveled, riding to surround the 2 men. Li Wei set the pot down and rose from a low stone. He raised a hand in greeting. Hail, riders of Rohan. Sengel hissed at his side, whispering, They don't look hostile. Their spears aren't pointed at us. A man detached from the mounted group dismounted and took off his helmet. That gesture was a clear sign, lowered guard, a friend, not an enemy. He bowed to Li Wei. Legend Li Wei, he said. The newcomer's armor marked him as the Marshal of Rohan, the highest military rank in Rohan, comparable to the commander in Gondor. He looked to Sengel and blinked, recognition crossing his face. Wait, hold on, that voice? Is that you, Your Highness? Sengel's face went pale beneath his scarf. He clapped a hand to his throat and cried out at once, You're mistaken. I'm just a passing traveler. Oh, the marshal said, a little awkward. He gave the sweating, cloaked figure a look that spoke volumes and then turned back to Li Wei. Forgive us for disturbing you. You happened to pass through our patrol. If you need rest, Audiobook is that way. We have a garrison there. I appreciate the offer, but I must be on my way, Li Wei said. I'll continue after I eat. Then safe travels, the marshal replied, placing his helmet carefully back on and remounting. As he turned his head, he called after them. If you don't mind me asking, where are you headed, and what is your purpose? To adore us, Li Wei answered bluntly, to give your king a good beating. The marshal's eyes widened. He looked from Li Wei to the hooded figure at his side. Say that again? I said I'm going to give your king a beating. Excuse me, the wind's strong. I can't hear you, the marshal shouted, straining his voice a few paces away. Then he wheeled his horse, waved an order, and called to his men. We're retreating. The Rohan riders turned and rode off, leaving Li Wei and Sengel alone on the frost-tinted grass. Chapter 205, Breaking Through the Grand Hall. You've probably been exposed. Li Wei glanced at Sengel and shrugged. Don't you think the wind's been a little strong? Sengel was stubborn. I left right after my coming-of-age ceremony. It's been nearly 20 years. I've changed so much. There's no way they could recognize me. If you say so. Li Wei gave up arguing. The situation was obvious enough. The Grand Marshal of Rohan didn't hold his post for show. As the king's chief general, his duty was to protect the crown's dignity, no matter how poor the king's reputation might be. An outsider claiming to have beaten the king would demand at least a show of force. Still, the stakes changed if that outsider stood with the people's prince, Sengel, the only legitimate heir. That would make a very different kind of trouble. They finished the last of their mushroom soup, mounted their horses, and rode west past Audiobook. A day later, in the open plain, Sengel pointed to a gleaming palace on a distant hill. Meduseld, he said. The Golden Hall, that's where the king lives. They exchanged a look and a brief nod. Around midnight, torches lit the approach, and even in the dark, the hall's splendor was unmistakable. Firelight danced off gilt pillars and flowed over jeweled carvings of birds and beasts that adorned the gate. Halt! At the entrance, 2 guards crossed their swords to block the way. Their hands were steady, but their labored breathing betrayed their nerves. The throne's presence pressed on them from beyond the gate. "I need to see your king." "Please wait," one guard said. The Grand Marshal in charge of Adora soon arrived with dozens of armored soldiers and sealed off the gate. Their line made an impenetrable circle. "Greetings, Legend Liyue." "Forgive me." The Grand Marshal stared at Liyue, his voice catching. Protocol required disarming any visitor seeking an audience with the king. Still, how meaningful was that in front of someone like Liyue? Duty, however, was duty. "I must confiscate your weapons before you may enter to see King Fengel." Liyue raised his hands without protest. The Grand Marshal heaved a sigh of relief and searched him personally. He found nothing, only the black armor Liyue wore. After a thorough check, Sengel was allowed through as well. At the Marshal's signal, they followed him into the hall. "Who's visiting at this hour? Don't they know it's my snack time?" The white-haired King Fengel dozed on the throne, belly sagging, already complaining before he saw them. "Liyue, Lord of Roadside Fort," announced the Grand Marshal. "A lord." The king squinted, then brightened. "Ah, yes, I remember now. A rising star of the north. Your name's been all over the reports these past years. What brings you here?" "I heard you had our caravan detained some time ago," Liyue said calmly. "Did I?" Fengel feigned confusion, scratching his head and staring at his hands. "I'm sorry. I don't recall doing such a thing. Perhaps you have the wrong man. My people wouldn't lie to me." "Then be careful. Not everyone appears as they truly are." Liyue's expression didn't change. "I investigated on my way here. You did try to seize the caravan's goods, didn't you?" "So what if I did?" Fengel dropped the act. "Your caravan undercut the local market and I detained them under the law." "What law?" "Relevant law." "What relevant law?" "The relevant law I passed." Liyue couldn't help a cold clap. Sengel's fists curled at his sides. Anger showed in the set of his jaw. He couldn't hold back. "You incompetent fool." "What did you say?" Fengel snapped, affronted. "Who is this insolent foreigner, daring to speak to me so?" Fengel jabbed at Sengel with a finger. "For the sake of the man beside you, I'll forgive this once, but control your tongue. Next time it won't be so simple." "Outsider," Fengel smirked. He was cut off when Liyue stepped in front of Sengel. "So you plan to refuse to admit your mistake, yes? What mistake have I made?" "All right." Liyue smiled, turned to Sengel. "You go out first, then come back in a moment." Sengel glanced at Liyue, then at the king, gave a slow nod and left the hall. Liyue took a step forward, stretched one hand casually and said, "It seems your head, filled with nothing but food, drink, and hoarding wealth, has become muddled. It could use a correction." Fengel stiffened. He barked an order. "Seize him." "Sir, halt." The Grand Marshal stepped forward. Bang! A fist slammed into him and he went down. Before he could reach for his sword, a blade suddenly thudded into the floor beside his neck, sending chills through him. For a heartbeat, his breath and heartbeat both stuttered. "You are already dead," someone said. Metal clanged as Liyue drew a hidden blade and parried an attack from behind. He spun, kicked 2 attackers sprawling, and smashed a nearby lampstand with a crash. Chaos exploded in the hall. The king scrambled up, cowering behind his throne. Clangs of metal and shouts filled the space. Soldiers surged, led by the Grand Marshal, trying to block Liyue's way, but each was knocked aside. As some men tried to rise again, a strong hand shot out and grabbed one of their feet, yanking him back down. "Don't make a sound. Keep lying down. That man is Prince Sengel's companion. He won't do anything outrageous," a low voice ordered. The Grand Marshal closed his eyes, tilted his head, and settled into an expression of deep, almost serene resignation. Chapter 226. Farewell. The commotion in the palace alerted the guards outside, and the captain of the guard led his men rushing in. When he saw soldiers sprawled across the hall and the chaos on the floor, his first reaction was fury. But when his eyes fell on the Grand Marshal lying there as well, something clicked. Despite the mess and the noise, no one seemed seriously hurt. The legendary fighter had used his sword only as a shield, never once striking with it. Every person on the floor had been felled by his fists and feet. "Stop!" After a few seconds to take it in, the captain of the guard gave the order and charged at Leeway with his men. It was useless. In moments, the hall was littered with unconscious soldiers, each wearing a strangely peaceful expression. The longsword scraped along the stone slabs, leaving a jagged groove. When the grating sound finally faded, Fungal could no longer hide his face. He saw the Grand Marshal, the captain, and more than 100 soldiers all sprawled, knocked out. "Worthless, all of you," he snarled. "You might as well take off your armor, sell it, and send the money to my household. Those treasures would do more for me than you ever could." "Wait, don't come any closer." Fengal's bluster cracked into terror. "I admit my mistake. I admit it. I won't pursue this. Just don't come any closer. I warn you, if you touch me, you'll be challenging all of Rohan." The tall, dark figure advanced slowly. Fengal shrieked and scrambled beneath the throne, whimpering for help. Thump! Crack! A flurry of punches and kicks silenced him. Leeway grabbed Fengal by the chest, preparing to deliver another lesson, but then paused. He glanced at two soldiers behind him who, out of curiosity, peeked up. The two quickly looked away, turned their heads, and lay back down. With one last strike, Leeway let Fengal go and tossed him to the floor. "Woo, my teeth! My teeth! I'll never be able to eat meat again." Once the dust settled, Sengel, who had been waiting outside, entered. He strode up and scolded, voice heavy. "You should realize how much harm your actions have brought Rohan. You never cared how your people lived or what they needed. You never cared about Rohan's army, nor the warriors who ride day and night to protect the realm." "What does that have to do with me?" Fengal wailed, clutching his mouth. Sengel's expression hardened. Whether it was an illusion or not, the hall felt even quieter now. The chests of the fallen soldiers rose and fell. Nobody could say what they were thinking. Sengel stepped forward, grabbed Fungal, and stared at his aging face. The last shred of warmth in his gaze vanished. It was as if the man beneath him was a stranger, though he covered only half his face and didn't change his voice, though they shared the same hair color. Even the Grand Marshal and the captain of the guard had recognized him. His own father had not. He never had cared. Thump! Sengel struck with full force. Fengal went silent, his greed and gluttony finally undone by the blows. He rolled his eyes and fainted. "Father, this is the last time I'll call you that." Sengel let go and turned to leave. "Wait, Your Highness, aren't you here to ascend the throne?" the Grand Marshal blurted from the floor as he pushed himself up. Sengel didn't stop. "If you don't take the throne, then what was the point of all this?" he called back over his shoulder. He didn't look back. The captain of the guard, unable to remain still, rose as well and watched him go. Sengel walked out in silence. "Sir," someone began. Leeway shrugged and started to leave, but the Grand Marshal blocked his path. He looked in the direction Sengel had gone, then at Leeway, clearly wanting to say much but not knowing how. "Don't worry," he managed. "He'll return when the time is right." Nobody in the hall spoke. The farce had ended as the sun rose. After the incident in the Golden Hall, King Fengal fell ill. He lost his appetite and grew weaker, appearing less and less in public and spending most of his time recuperating at home. "I want that fellow hunted down," Fengal ranted one day. He ordered a bounty on Leeway. The decree was poorly executed and barely spread beyond a few circles. The bounty became no more than a rumor. People would say, "They say the king put a price on that legend," but few could confirm it. One day, an unremarkable figure in a gray robe passed through a town in Rohan. Hearing the rumor, Gandalf frowned. Leeway had broken into the Golden Hall and beaten the king? How could such a thing be? Their quarrel didn't make sense. After asking around, Gandalf received an answer from a local. "Utterly foolish," the man scoffed. "How dare he hijack the roadside fort's caravan? No, he shouldn't touch any caravan. The man has lost his mind." Gandalf shook his head, lit his pipe, and thought. The current king of Rohan was indeed selfish, greedy, and neglectful, alienating his subordinates and ignoring state affairs. But were his faults worthy of death? Whether the king lived or died mattered less than this. Fungal had dared to put a bounty on Leeway. That was dangerous for Rohan. Gandalf decided he needed to go and reason with the king. Soon Gandalf arrived at the Golden Hall. "Gandalf the Grey," they greeted. "Ah, wizard, what news do you bring?" Fengal asked, pale as he sat upon the throne. Gandalf's eyes fell on the scratch across the hall floor, and he said bluntly, I heard you issued a bounty on Legend Laiwei. With respect, that was not a wise move. This order will bring no benefit to Rohan and could bring disaster. Shut your crow's mouth, wizard, the king snapped. Gandalf bowed his head and sighed. Another obstinate king, another wasted effort. He had seen many. Still, when Fungal added, ever since that hateful fellow left, I've been afflicted with a sickness. I'm listless, I can't eat, and I have nightmares. He must have cursed me. Come, examine me. Gandalf's face grew serious. If dark magic were involved, everything else would be secondary. The guard stood aside at his signal. Gandalf approached and examined the king carefully. When he finished, his verdict was measured but clear. Fengel's illness was not supernatural. It was fear, an intense psychological condition, a severe case of neurasthenia. Is there a way to cure it? Fengel asked desperately. Gandalf shook his head. It cannot be cured. Farewell. Thanks to Chen Feng for the 100-coin reward, and thanks to everyone who voted. Thank you all for your monthly and recommendation votes. There will also be an extra chapter today. Chapter 227, Farewell. I should go now. On the third day after his return to Gondor, Li Wei said goodbye to the Chancellor's household and the Sengel family. The caravan's goods are nearly sold out, so I'll go on with them to other places. You must come often. Gondor's gates are always open to you, Ecthelion said, clasping Li Wei's hands. His reluctance was genuine, not mere politeness. Do come find me anytime. Sengel joined them with his family and smiled. Traveling with you was so pleasant and relaxed. I won't forget it. Ecthelion leaned in conspiratorially. I heard about what happened in Rohan. Ha ha! That was quite something. If you ever have another trip like that, be sure to call me. I'd love to travel with you again. Actually, I haven't left Gondor in years. Sengel trailed off, sneaking a glance at his aged father. Ahem, Turgon cleared his throat. There are still many duties to be handled. We can discuss the matter later. Ecthelion visibly deflated. He was no longer the ambitious young man who could lead armies wherever he pleased. Now over 60, his strength was fading, and Turgon was preparing to pass on his office. Once Ecthelion assumed the chancellorship, travel would likely be a rare luxury. The affairs of Gondor would rest on his shoulders, and for security reasons, his subordinates would seldom permit him to wander. If he was to take any more long journeys, it would be in the next few years. Maybe there will be a chance, he said quietly. After a few light embraces and final exchanges, Li Wei went to find the caravan. As he turned, he felt a prickling at the back of his neck and remembered he had yet to say farewell to the old chancellor, standing at the very end. Li Wei placed his hand over his own heart and extended it toward Turgon, an elven gesture of embrace. Turgon, whose own name echoed the Elven High King, understood immediately and returned the gesture. The moment was later captured by a Gondorian artist, framed and hung in the Chancellor's bedchamber as a lasting memorial of Li Wei's friendship with the Chancellor and with Gondor itself. It drew countless visitors, hoping to glimpse it. This time, I truly must go. Under a clear sky, several people watched until Li Wei's figure disappeared down the city steps. In the north market of Minas Tirith, residents had bought what they needed, and the caravan members packed their wares, waiting for one last person before setting out. I didn't expect to have the chance to travel with the Lord, one of the two apprentice rangers said in the carriage, excitement in his voice. Maybe we'll meet something like in the adventure tales, some mighty enemy, and the guard fights to the death to protect the Lord. At the mention of protecting the Lord, Arwen, one of the rangers, paused. The other ranger looked at him with a bemused expression. Protect the Lord? Dream on. Read fewer of those nonsense storybooks. Can't I at least imagine it? The first ranger protested. The idea that anyone would form a guard to protect their lord was unlikely here. In other lands, princes and nobles traveled with well-equipped retinues, but in the roadside fort and across the free city-states, the situation was nearly the opposite. The lord often outmatched any assembled force from the territories combined. It was hard to say who would protect whom. How did the goods sell? Li Wei asked as he approached, waving a hand. Very well, Charlie, the caravan leader, reported. Everything sold out. The people of Gondor loved them. With the money, we bought many local specialties, things everyone will enjoy. Li Wei nodded. No one asked for profit figures, and Charlie didn't offer any. In roadside fort custom, neither the lord nor the people fussed over such details. As long as everyone was content, that was enough. "Then let's depart," Li Wei said. "Yes," the salesmen and guards called back, lining up at the head of the convoy in neat formation. "Sir, which way do we go? Back the same route?" Charlie asked. "North, to River Valley City," Li Wei announced. Charlie unrolled a map and traced a line north from Gondor. He hesitated. "Are we really taking that way?" To the north lay only two choices: a track through the dead marshes and rocky hills, impassable for wagons, or the main road past the Black Gate, close to Mordor's borders and teeming with orcs. Neither route was appealing. "It's fine. Take the main road. That's how I came," Li Wei said, taking the map and pointing. "From the North Road through North Ithilien, then the Harad Road past the Black Gate, and on to the Anduin Road. It's the shortest shortcut. From there, a little more north, and you'll reach Long Lake Town. You haven't been there yet, have you?" "We haven't." At that time, the Sky Road remained unopened. Indeed, it still wasn't officially open. The delay was because everyone insisted on waiting for Li Wei to return before holding the completion ceremony. Cities on either side of the mountains had only vague impressions of each other, and the new road promised to shrink that distance to a few days' travel. Curiosity and the sense of responsibility alike made Charlie question the route. The northern road, though shortest, had been avoided by caravans for generations. Even those who braved snow and high passes had preferred to bypass this stretch. "If anything goes wrong, I'll take responsibility," Li Wei said, patting his chest. "Very well," Charlie agreed. Resolved, the caravan set off. Gondor's people watched as the procession left the White City and moved north under their gaze. They passed the outpost Amon Din, the nearest beacon hill to the city, crossed a bridge, traversed the island of Calenardon in the Anduin River, and nodded at the Gondor garrison stationed there. A few days later, they reached the border of North Ithilien and rode into the ash-strewn plains of Dagorlad. Chapter 228, The Black Gate. Dagorlad stretched out like a gray sea of ash across the plains opposite the Black Gate in northern Mordor. It was called the Plain of Battle for good reason. Crucial wars that shaped Middle-earth had been fought here. At the end of the Second Age, the last alliance of elves and men met Sauron in a decisive clash on this very ground. They defeated him and tore the ring from his hand, but it cost them 2 high kings and countless warriors. Almost every force of the Free Peoples had gathered here. Lindon, Arnor, Gondor, before Rohan existed, Khazad-dûm, Lothlorien, bringing their elites to confront Sauron's innumerable host. The battle dragged on for years, and even when the Alliance reached Sauron's fortress, they could not break the tower's enchantments. Had Sauron not come out himself and made a single mistake, he might have endured much longer. Given the forces arrayed against him, high kings, elven lords wearing rings of power, squadrons of elite guards, survival was not guaranteed. In that light, Sauron had been in a hard place too. A cart rolled along the road. Li Wei lay on a stack of goods, staring up at the pale sky and thinking about all that had happened on this plain. The gentle thumps of the wagon put him to sleep. He closed his eyes and let his breathing slow. Sometimes, he thought, sleep was entertainment enough. Far off, the Black Gate loomed, iron bars and black stone sealing the only easy way into Mordor. Everywhere else was hemmed in by the Shadow Mountains, sheer, impassable ridges that formed a natural barrier. Entry and exit normally happened only through the gate, and it was heavily garrisoned and strictly guarded. No one in their right mind passed through it unannounced. So when a human caravan rolled down the main road toward the gate, the orc sentries stationed above it nearly fell out of their teeth in disbelief. "Are we seeing things?" one muttered, half hungry and half hysterical. "It looks like a human caravan, full of goods, coming right down the road," another replied, pointing. The dull clank of wheels carried faintly to them. They didn't look like allies. Alarmed, the garrison reacted. The great iron doors creaked and swung open a crack, and a squad of fully armed orcs poured out, with several massive steel-armored ologs at their head. The caravan guards raised their weapons and braced for a fight. Even from a distance, the ologs looked different, heavily plated, more solid than any foe they had met before. Compared with the poorly kitted orcs of the Lonely Lands, these looked like veterans. As the distance closed and an Olog loomed to heave over a wagon, a motion from the pile of goods in the center caught the attacker's attention. A figure pushed himself up and looked across. The orcs hesitated, their leader signaled to hold, but the Ologs thundered on anyway. "Idiots, back!" the leader shouted. Whoosh! An arrow set one of the Ologs aflame. Li Wei tossed an ender pearl and sprang from the wagon. Purple particles drifted down, and he reappeared on an Olog's head, plunging his sword into a gap in the armor. Black blood spurted, soaking him. The beast roared, grabbed Li Wei, and flung him into the air. By the time it realized he was gone, another cloud of purple had fallen. Li Wei stood on the next Olog's helmet and drove a brilliant blue-edged blade through its throat. By then, 3 Ologs were crippled. The 4th hesitated, staring at Li Wei with a new wariness. As it drew back, a voice shouted in the black speech, Sauron's language, rough words that carried a sting of dark will. The orcs stiffened. The chant kindled something like courage in them. Not good. Li Wei didn't waste time. He tossed another pearl, teleported up, and sliced through the big Olog's tendons at an opening in the armor, forcing it to its knees. He followed with armor break to strike at critical points, then pressed the attack to finish it. The remaining Ologs, on instinct and fury, leveled massive axes and rushed him. Li Wei planted his shield and stood his ground, taking their steamroller blows head-on while cutting down the most wounded. The impact shattered his shield. His belt's emergency mechanism triggered, releasing a shockwave that knocked 2 Ologs down. Once down, their fate was sealed. The last Olog fell silent. The shield recharged slowly, wrapping him again. Against creatures like Ologs and war elephants, a bit of maneuvering and kiting could wipe them without taking a scratch. But this was different from the unavoidable damage he'd faced once against the Nazgul at the crossroads. This was brute force and endurance, a contest he could control. Killing without taking damage was satisfying, but it could never replace the raw feeling of standing and taking the blows. He drew his sword, and the orcs, stirred by the black speech, watched as he casually shrugged off blows from weapons twice a man's size. Their bravery collapsed under the sight. He chopped through an Olog's neck and helmet. Black blood splattered the road in a sudden, brutal display. Then he leveled the blade at the orc chieftain. "If you don't want me to tear this gate down and clear out everything moving inside, then fall back. Now." The orc leader swallowed, waved his men back, and kept his eye on Li Wei until the human disappeared inside. The massive iron doors banged shut, sealing Mordor away again. Li Wei sheathed his sword and climbed back onto the wagon. He turned to Charlie, the caravan leader, and said, "You were right. Next time, we should avoid this route." He had been reckless. Mordor's true elites, the Ologs, the warriors who answered Sauron, didn't fear much so long as Sauron lived, unless faced with something like a dragon or a Balrog. Passing through the Black Gate alone had been tolerable for him. If intimidation failed, he could fight, but he'd risked his people. If he'd adopted a completely evasive, no-damage tactic earlier, dodging and feinting, those orcs might have taken it as fear and overwhelmed them. He couldn't be everywhere at once. He couldn't clone himself to stop a full charge. The ease of always acting alone had almost gotten the caravan killed. Mordor was not something to be trifled with. Chapter 229, Grand Road Town. Beyond the gate, from here on out, the journey never ends. Clang, clang. The carriage lurched, and those inside shifted with it. A not quite beautiful humming drifted from within, plain, unadorned, but it drew the attention of several people in the convoy. "The Lord is humming," someone murmured. 2 rangers with the keenest ears traced the sound to its source. As the carriage rolled on, the company finally left the bleak, oppressive stretch of land behind them. Vast and barren, with no trees or grass, not even broken trunks or scattered stones, this was a truly dead landscape. It had not always been so. This was the legacy of Sauron's Scorched Earth campaign. Armies had marched through here, burning and leveling everything. Even after more than 3,000 years, the Earth had not recovered. Later, the place came to be called the Brownlands. When the caravan reached the ancient crossroads south of the Black Forest, the eastern gate of Rovanion, the humming stopped. 2 roads lay before them. The Anduin Road led down into the Anduin Valley, into the territory of the Bayonne clan. The Rovanion Road led into the River Valley's domain. "Take the Rovanion Road," Li Wei ordered. They moved out again. Two rangers drifted closer and spoke to each other in low tones. Li Wei noticed them moving. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "No," one replied, then blushed. "We were just curious about the song you were humming earlier." "Oh, that." Li Wei shifted his position and reclined more comfortably. "I learned it from Gandalf, the Grey Wizard. He's a friend of mine." "The Grey Wizard?" The young ranger's eyes brightened. "Are there other wizards?" "Yes," Li Wei said, "but I've only met 4. One I never really met at all. He was taken by another wizard." "Taken?" The word piqued their curiosity, and Li Wei obliged, telling a few episodes from his travels. It wasn't long before 2 rangers listening became several, and people in nearby wagons edged closer to catch the tale. Stories and travel filled the hours, and the roads slipped by. After several slow days, the caravan crossed the bridge at the ford of Carrick and officially entered the river valley's jurisdiction. Ahead, along the Grand Road, a new settlement rose into view, Grand Road Town. The town had only been established in recent years by the River Valley authorities. It sat where the River Valley Road, the Rovanian Road, and the Eastern Grand Road met, hence its name. A year earlier, when Li Wei had agreed to include this region within his sphere of influence, Bard had immediately set people to work. Incredibly quickly, a town rose at the junction, and guilds and markets followed. Grand Road Town was connected to everywhere. Gondor and Rohan to the west, River Valley City and the Long Lake in the south, the Black Forest, the Iron Hills, Dorwinion, even Rhûn in the far east and the Red Mountains beyond. Geographically speaking, all the grand roads seemed to lead here. Protected by Li Wei's territory and benefiting from its location, the town had become a place for traveling merchants to warehouse goods. Gradually, it was becoming the logistics hub of the north. Today, it bustled. At first, the caravan drew little notice. Grand Road Town saw many such parties, and larger convoys often passed through. Then a single banner unfurled in the wind, bearing one name, and people stopped to stare. Roadside Fort, the first city of the free city-states west of the Misty Mountains, the place where Li Wei made his seat. Rumors ran through the crowd. If that was Roadside Fort, the people must live better than even the prosperous River Valley. To the townsfolk, the River Valley already meant security and plenty, houses and clothes for all, food in good supply, education for those who wanted it, and fewer bandits on the roads. They could not imagine what life in Roadside Fort might be like if it surpassed this. Curiosity spread quickly. "Hey, are you from Roadside Fort?" a bold young man called out. "Yes," came the reply. Charlie, sitting near the front of the caravan, answered with a grin. The people pressed closer, eager to hear. "How did you get here? I heard that road isn't even in use yet." "We walked." Charlie's voice was matter of fact. From Roadside Fort south, across the lonely land, over Erebor, through Rohan and Gondor, and then north, coming in from the Black Gate. "The Black Gate?" Heads snapped up. A ripple of alarm passed through those within earshot. "Weren't you stopped by the orcs of Mordor? I heard a caravan once tried that gray plain and never came back." "Is it safe there now?" someone asked. Charlie shrugged. "No, don't think that." He fell silent for a moment, then added, "We only dared because." His gaze drifted back toward the carriage. "Because of what?" the questioner demanded, following Charlie's look. Slowly, people caught sight of the man sitting inside the carriage. Once they realized who it was, whispers swelled. "Unless you have several thousand well-equipped elite guards, it's best not to go that way," Li Wei said calmly. "Fewer than 1,000 could probably not even stop their vanguard." At that, someone cried out, and heads turned en masse as if a magnet had drawn them. Those on the road craned their necks. Those in doorways peered out. "The Lord," someone shouted. Realization dawned on the crowd. Goods personally escorted by the Lord. The idea sent them surging forward. "Let me see," they called, pushing through. The merchandise from Roadside Fort was not radically different from what River Valley City or Long Lake Town offered. If anything, the variety here was broader, prices comparable, and quality much the same. What set this caravan apart was its composition and the fact that the goods had been brought under the direct protection of Li Wei. "Don't buy it. Don't buy it. Those are special things I brought back for everyone at Roadside Fort." Charlie shouted, scrambling to repack his small stall, stuffing wares back into crates and onto his cart. He wanted to protect the specialties he had been entrusted to purchase. Li Wei laughed and patted his thigh. All right, we're moving on. With a flurry of activity, the caravan finished loading. The crowd lingered, still buzzing, as the wagons pulled away from Grand Road Town and followed the River Valley Road toward Long Lake Town. You're finally back. As soon as Li Wei stepped into the Long Lake Town mayor's office, Bard hurried over and locked the door, as if afraid Li Wei might slip away again. Li Wei knew he would have been stopped if he'd tried to get up and walk out. Bard would have barked, "You cannot pass." "Can't you have a little faith in your lord?" Li Wei said. "Yes, I do. Lots of faith. I just worry that if we're not careful, our lord will vanish," Bard answered, then busied himself brewing a cup of hot tea. Making tea had become automatic whenever Li Wei visited. Bard always made sure the kettle was on. "I went to Great Road Town," Li Wei said, taking the offered cup and sipping. The tea tasted the same as before. "It's impressive. It's bigger than most cities now." "Should we call it Great Road City then?" Bard poured himself a cup and sat opposite him. "That sounds odd." Li Wei shook his head. "Let it be for now. No rush. It'll grow on its own." "When are you returning to Roadside Fort?" Bard asked as soon as Great Road Town was done. "The road is almost finished. Everyone's waiting for you. The residents are eager for the opening. Honestly, it could have been in use long ago." "Soon." Li Wei bit into a soft biscuit from the table and smiled. "I'm back now, aren't I? I'll preside over the opening ceremony soon." "Good." Bard let out a long breath of relief. Then, curiosity getting the better of him, he asked, "By the way, where have you been recently? You were offline for so long." Li Wei chuckled. "I went south." "You mean to the southern lands with all the fruits? Lemons, oranges, pomegranates, dates, watermelons? I heard about those." Bard leaned forward. "You brought some back?" "I did. We can plant them in the nearby open areas." Li Wei sipped his tea. "The scenery down there is beautiful, the architecture is different, and the people have darker bronze skin, but they weren't very friendly." "Not very friendly?" Bard frowned. He had a bad feeling. "That's when I rescued a prisoner, and they sent thousands after me, plus giant elephants. I had to beat them all back." "Well, that sounds like nothing less than a diplomatic incident." Li Wei smiled. "You must have rescued someone important." "They were the captain of Gondor's frontline assault team," Bard said. "That's excellent. They'll be grateful." Li Wei nodded. "They are. None of their team was lost. I think he's still alive." Bard shrugged, pleased. They talked on. Hearing that Li Wei had fought ringwraiths to save Gondor's honor and accepted the Prime Minister's highest gift made Bard genuinely glad. It was both a personal courtesy to Li Wei and a boon to the Free City States. A powerful ally in Gondor could mean more cooperation ahead. "And then? You came straight back?" Bard asked. "No, I went to Rohan." Li Wei said it casually. "To Rohan?" Bard muttered, raising his cup. "I gave their king a good beating." "Wait, what?" Li Wei nearly choked on his tea. Bard coughed twice, then sucked in a sharp breath. "A major diplomatic incident." "Why are you so calm?" he demanded. Li Wei patted Bard on the back and took a towel from his son, Bane, to wipe the table. "Oh, Bane's grown tall," he said, glancing over. Without Li Wei noticing, Bane had nearly caught up with him in height. "Yes, uncle, I'm an adult now." Bane puffed out his chest and accepted Li Wei's inspection like a soldier. "Good. Your voice has changed too. The boy who used to tremble holding a sword has grown up." Li Wei sighed with feeling. "He enlisted and just finished training," Bard said. "Bane's archery is the best among his group. His hand is steady. If he's good with a bow, he could become a ranger," Li Wei said. "At Roadside Fort, there are nomad instructors. They'll train him and give him plenty of combat opportunities." The river valley had been calm lately. Since Orktown was cleared out, orcs and goblins rarely ventured close. Most had been pushed into Gundabad or the Black Mountains. "I will," Bane replied. "Let's wait until the road is open." Bard waved him off, watching Bane go. He mulled over the Rohan affair again. If anyone should be nervous, it was Rohan. So what happened with Rohan? Did their king apologize? Li Wei explained the complicated situation. Bard listened and then said, "His rule won't last much longer. Once Prince Sengel returns, things should settle." "That'll be in a few years at most," Li Wei agreed. He took another bite of pastry, thinking the conversation was winding down, when Bard added, "Oh, one more thing. Do you remember the Bayoun clan in the Anduin Valley?" "Of course. Their leader, Beorn, asked if you would accept their fealty. They want to join the Free City States and be incorporated as one of our territories. Li Wei sputtered tea. He hadn't expected that. Expansion had never been his priority. Even the River Valley had been accepted with his half-hearted consent. He believed in letting independent communities choose their own path. The towns under Roadside Fort and the River Valley had already shown his approach. He didn't force anyone. If a group had no ill intentions, his goodwill could be unconditional. When did he ask? Li Wei said, putting the pastry down. Just last month. He said he'd thought it over carefully. If he's willing, then fine. Li Wei stood, finishing his tea. It's on my way. I'll go and accept it as territory. That should satisfy them. Bard shook his head briefly, clearing away doubts. I think it's a good thing for both sides. Then it's settled. Li Wei rose. Where are you going? Bard stood as well. Don't worry, I'm not leaving, just taking a look around. I'll go with you, Li Wei said. As you wish, Bard answered. They left the office and took a special carriage toward River Valley City. The road was smooth, and soon they reached the foot of the lonely mountain. The city was as it had always been, prosperous, bustling, bright. Wait a moment, there's a pastry shop. Oh, it's still open. Li Wei bought a cream bun, and the owner, delighted, stuffed a large basket of pastries into his arms and refused payment, just like last time when the owner had given him a basket of honey crams. Li Wei still had some left, tucked in his backpack. Your baking's improved, Li Wei told the owner, smiling at the small buns. These are better than last time's honey crams. Thank you. Your praise is my best reward, the baker said, grinning until his ears nearly reached the corners of his mouth. With the basket, Li Wei wandered into a narrow alley, exactly where, years ago, he had once sat and waited for Gandalf and shared half a biscuit and a honey cram with an old man. Huh? Several residents were moving furniture. One set down an item and bowed. My lord. We're sorting out the house, one of them said. The owner passed away. Li Wei froze. Was it an old man? Yes, my lord. He died of old age, peacefully. Li Wei nodded, feeling unexpectedly hollow. He set the basket on the ground and watched the residents tidy the home. Time had moved on. He thought of that afternoon years ago, of the old man's conversation and the bread he had shared. After a while, Li Wei bowed slightly toward the house, the same small gesture the old man had once given him. He felt a weight settle over him and an anxious urge to be somewhere else, or perhaps nowhere at all. My lord! The resident who had been handling the belongings hurried up with something in his hand. Please forgive my interruption. The owner left this for you. He handed Li Wei a neatly folded letter. Li Wei put down the basket and, without thinking about his backpack, opened it. The handwriting was crooked, simple, filling the page as if written by a hand that had grown old or had only recently learned to steady a pen. To my beloved Lord Li Wei, my life has not been a kind one. My wife died from illness, and my son was killed by orcs on the Great Road. Loneliness and poverty have been my companions for decades. Even if you do not remember an old man like me, I was very happy to have met you, to have your protection, and to own a home, even if I lived there alone. When I talked with you, I felt relaxed and happy. The bread you gave me was the first time I ever tasted honey. I will always remember that taste. My beloved Lord, I can feel my time is short. I regret that I cannot see you one last time. Perhaps there is nothing to say. I just wanted to tell you, thank you. There was no signature. The resident reached into a pocket and handed over a honey cram wrapped in paper. The kind of bread was rare now. The old man had saved his most cherished pastry and left it for Li Wei, the same way Li Wei had once shared his own bread. Thanks to Ungamora for the 500 coin reward, and thanks to friends who voted monthly and recommended tickets. Thank you. Thank you. Chapter 231. Busy. Finished buying? Yes, finished. The baker at that pastry shop is still as enthusiastic as ever, and his skills have only gotten better. Li Wei reached into the basket and handed Bard what he considered the best pastry. What do you think of the new pastry the master developed? Very good. Bard nodded as he ate, his eyebrows lifting in genuine pleasure. If you like it, eat more. There's plenty. I should show some restraint. After finishing one, Bard stopped. It's almost dinner. I should save room for the main meal. All right. Li Wei put the basket away and followed Bard into a tavern. They had the usual hearty fare: roasted meat with vegetables and a piece of bread. It was a classic tavern meal, satisfying and simple. If someone wanted more, they'd add a thick soup and another piece of hard bread to soak up the broth, letting the crust absorb the stock. Very practical and very common. After he cleared his plate, Li Wei called to a passing maid, "May I have a mug of honey beer?" "Certainly. Oh, it's the Lord." The maid blushed, hurried to the counter, and filled a wooden mug with foamy honey beer. Since Li Wei had brought bees from Bjorn, honey no longer had to be imported. Both Roadside Fort and River Valley had beekeeping areas, often planted with cherry trees. At first, the residents were startled by the square bees, almost as big as a human head, but once they learned that the bees didn't sting unless provoked, people grew bolder. Some even patted them when they came across them on the road. The large, plump bees did look oddly endearing. Li Wei drank greedily. "Ah, this feels really good." He set down his empty mug with a sigh. A little honey beer after a meal was refreshing. "Another one." He ordered another mug almost immediately. "Don't you want any?" Li Wei looked across at Bard, who had another bowl of soup and a piece of hard bread. "No, I'd rather not. I have a lot to do this afternoon and need to stay clear-headed." As ever, Bard kept himself disciplined. "All right." Li Wei put his mug down and, absent-mindedly munching on a crunchy carrot, let Bard finish. Once he was certain Li Wei was just wandering, Bard hailed a carriage and returned to Long Lake Town to handle the endless stream of affairs that awaited him. Watching the carriage leave, Li Wei stood for a moment, then turned and walked toward the Erebor gate. The guards by the gate stepped aside and bowed slightly, treatment befitting the king under the mountain. Erebor remained magnificent and busy. If you listened closely, you could still hear hammering echo through the halls. The dwarves were digging deeper into the gray mountains behind Erebor, using the fortress as their staging ground. Erebor might seem small from the outside, but its internal space and development potential rivaled the human and elven realms. Backed by the vast gray mountains, the dwarves had only begun to scratch the surface, and the wealth drawn from even that corner had already drawn dragons more than once. Crossing the bustling market and splendid bridges, Li Wei reached the council hall, where Thorin was waiting. It's been a while. As soon as he spotted Li Wei, Thorin turned with a smile. The subordinate Thorin had been speaking with paused his discussion and greeted Li Wei with a somewhat helpless look. Whatever had been pressing at hand took second place the moment Li Wei arrived. "It certainly has been a while. How have you been?" "As usual, very busy, but I'm glad to be busy. It means things are moving in the right direction." "That's excellent. Have you eaten?" Li Wei asked out of habit. Thorin hesitated. "No, actually I haven't. Too much to do, I forgot. Now that you mention it, my stomach reminds me I should eat. Shall we get something?" "I've eaten, but I don't mind a bit more." They moved to a table and soon a large platter of bone-in roasted meat, very dwarven, arrived, with a few pieces of bread. No vegetables or fruit were ordered. "Try this sauce," Thorin said, breaking off a piece of meat and pointing to a dish thick with butter and roasted drippings. The combination filled Li Wei quickly. "That's enough. No more. I'll have another mug of ale." The cold ale settled him. Unlike the sweet ease of the honey beer, dwarf ale had its own briskness. "Refreshing," Li Wei said. "I feel like I could eat another piece." "Then eat. You have to be full to do your work." Thorin handed him another piece and busied himself with his own plate, eating with hearty fervor. The sight whetted Li Wei's appetite, although the meat felt a little greasy once he reached the limit. The first bite is joy, the second is satisfaction, the rest a bit of torment, he mused inwardly. "So, is there anything else you came for?" "Nothing in particular. Just wanted to see a friend." "Glad you came, then." Their short lunch ended. As they stood, Thorin was called back to the matter he had been discussing. Li Wei finished his ale, stretched, and walked out of the Erebor gate. He still felt overly full, but the food had been good. He wandered through the square, looked at the statues commemorating the Dragon Slayer warrior and the Dragon Slayer archer, and climbed to the palace at the top to look out over Erebor and Raven Hill. After that, he melted into the city until no one saw him again. Night fell, and the warm glow of lanterns replaced daylight. The day's bustle wound down, and people returned home to their firesides. In a small alley, Tucked away from the main streets, someone sat on a step and tidied his robe. He was a familiar figure, statue-like in the gloom. A moment later, a gray-clad man appeared, tossed his staff against the wall like he had done years before, and lit his pipe. The pipe's glow outlined the silhouette in the doorway. "You've been sitting here a while." Gandalf's voice broke the quiet. Leeway sighed. "Have you eaten?" "Not yet." Leeway handed over a fresh pastry, still from that same master. Gandalf chewed and nodded. "Thank you. An improvement." "A wizard is never late," Gandalf said offhandedly. "Late? When something happens or someone needs help. Perhaps." Gandalf watched the smoke rise and said quietly, "Death is a road everyone walks. It cannot be avoided." "That doesn't mean people can't begin another journey after it," Leeway replied. "When life ends, consciousness falls into darkness and the senses dissolve into nothing. But after that, you might hear." "Hear what?" "The cry of a newborn, and see the light again." Leeway smiled. "Eru is merciful. He grants humanity a kind of freedom. Human souls can escape the chains of Arda and leave the mortal clamor behind, or go on to other worlds. Humans are the only race who can choose their own fate, not strictly bound by the great music." "I understand." He stood up and the flicker of nearby lanterns played across their faces. "Let's go eat. I'm a bit hungry." "Me too," Gandalf admitted, rubbing his stomach. "You have no idea how much I've walked in the last month. I was driven out of Rohan, drank undercooked mushroom soup in Gondor, and was chased by orcs through the Brown Lands. This world is mad." "That does sound rough. Let's find a place for a drink and you can tell me everything." Gandalf shook his head. "Not tonight." Leeway frowned. "What are you busy with now?" "Busy looking for you." Gandalf pouted. "Bard and Thorin kicked me out early so I could use what they call a wizard's sense to find you." Leeway looked mildly surprised. Gandalf tapped his pipe to his staff, then added, "They came by as soon as they finished their work, but they couldn't find you anywhere. Now hurry and come back with me. The star of tonight's party can't be missing." Chapter 232, Changes in Roadside Fort. From today on, this area is officially part of my territory. You may use all the miraculous resources. Someone will come to guide you later. The next day, in the Beorn clan's dwelling. In Beorn's hall, Leeway accepted the pledge of Beorn and his clan, and from that moment, the northern Anduin Valley became part of his domain. The Beorn clan was formally granted resident status. "Proclamation valid," someone announced. Gandalf once again stood as a witness. His knack for enjoying every ceremony was unmatched. With this, the road from construction to maintenance was complete. Residents from 3 territories, Roadside Fort, the Beorn clan, and River Valley, would each take responsibility for the road's beginning, middle, and end, guaranteeing a usable route and rapid reporting of any problems. "Time to go home," Leeway said. He rode at a gallop down the main road. Before long, he reached the old orc town, no longer called that. It had been renamed Mid-Road Town, or simply Halfway Town. Because of its location and purpose, clusters of houses and various living and watch facilities had been built along both sides of this great passage through the Misty Mountains. Similar settlements included Starting Town near Long Lake Town and 1/8 Town above the Black Forest, established for the Wood Elves at the road's entrance and exit. Although called towns, these places were really service areas, supply stops, and temporary rest points. Everything was now near completion. Beyond Halfway Town lay the other side of the Misty Mountains. Rivendell was just to the left when you stepped out, though the surrounding mountains hid it from view. Even though Leeway, Gandalf, and many rangers visited Rivendell often, most people in the world had never seen it. Many, including Bard once, treated Rivendell as a legendary, secluded haven of elves. Because Rivendell needed little trade and preferred seclusion, no special entrance was built there. The closest access lay near the last bridge. That also kept travelers safe from the ogre forest on the right, where many ogres still lived, but they could no longer threaten passersby. Nearby farming villages had long since relocated, most merging westward into Roadside Fort. Roadside Fort was the end of this sky road. Within a day, Leeway had ridden from Long Lake Town to the road's terminus, where residents waited. "The Lord has returned," someone shouted. Workers and residents had gathered to watch eagerly. Under the witness of many delegations, the long-awaited completion ceremony finally began. Present were the project founder and leader, Li Wei, the project manager, Bard, the Lonely Mountain Dwarves high-altitude construction team, represented by Thorin, the road maintenance team, represented by Bjorn, the ever-entertaining Gandalf, and most crucially, the laborers from every part of the territory. With the Eagle King's envoy looking on, Li Wei delivered his closing words. All the achievement of this labor belongs to the diligent workers. Now let us usher in a new era for the Northern Road. Thunderous applause erupted. Everyone who had helped build the road felt a deep pride. Their work would be remembered by the Lord and by all who traveled this road in the future. In the autumn of 2947, the Great Sky Road was completed and officially opened. People called it the Miracle of the North, and its creator and initiator was given the title Miracle Builder. Miracle Builder Li Wei. My head can't keep up. What titles do you have now? Gandalf frowned as he tried to recall all the honorifics. If you can't remember, don't bother. When, he muttered. After the ceremony, Li Wei, Gandalf, Bard, Thorin, and others walked down the road together and entered Roadside Fort. Gandalf hadn't visited in years. So many new buildings had gone up he barely recognized the place. Bard, who was seeing the town for the first time, peered around in wonder. I never imagined it would be this impressive. The architecture had an almost elven grace. Endless fountains, perpetual gardens, clean streets, towering golden malorn trees, and a nameless wizard's tower by the lake that pierced the clouds. The oldest original building still stood in the city center, Roadside Fort itself. Bard was spellbound. The early infrastructure had been solid, what you'd expect of any developing territory, but the later additions were extravagant. If I'm not mistaken, it hasn't been even 10 years since I was last here, Thorin said. To be precise, Gandalf replied slowly, 7 years and 4 months, Master Thorin. Durin above, Thorin muttered. Miracle Builder Li Wei. That title is well-deserved. No one could reasonably object. First-time visitors like Bard could marvel and believe the rumors, but those who had seen Roadside Fort before were struck speechless by how much it had changed. I have the feeling you're on edge, Li Wei, Gandalf observed, exhaling 2 thin trails of smoke. He had calmed himself a bit, then pointed out Li Wei's odd behavior. You're nervous, like a soldier before his first battle. Every rustle seems to make you jump. Am I? Li Wei asked. Yes, you're tense, keyed up. It's unusual for you, Thorin added. Bard looked concerned. Is something wrong? Li Wei forced a small smile. No, it's nothing. I just don't want to get knocked over. Or, that thing is larger than a grown pig now, and I can't quite handle its enthusiasm. The 3 companions exchanged puzzled looks. Thank you to Samong for the 100-coin reward, and thank you to the readers who voted, recommended, and supported me. Your encouragement is greatly appreciated. Hoo-hoo! A sharp panting came from behind them. When the ground shuddered underfoot, Li Wei braced himself. He tightened his stance and steadied his horse. Then, with a soft thud, something heavy collapsed over him, an immense weight pressed down across his body. A large, wet tongue licked his face. The creature whined as it licked. Li Wei worked the great head out of his line of sight. The others were not so calm. Dragon! Someone shouted. Enemy attack! Thorin drew his sword and lunged. Bard yanked a longbow from his back and set an arrow to the string. Even Gandalf planted his staff and prepared to intervene. Wait! Clang! The staff met Thorin's blade, and a gray robe swept up between Bard and his target. Gandalf? Thorin barked. Don't be rash, Gandalf said. Li Wei patted the creature's head and moved it fully to the side. This is not the kind of dragon you're thinking of. Thorin and Bard exchanged wary looks. Seeing that the beast, small, pink, and oddly benign, showed no hostility, and trusting Li Wei, they lowered their weapons but didn't relax completely. Both had seen what dragons could do. Erebor and the ruined Riverlands were still living scars to them. They would have liked to see every dragon dead. Gandalf tilted his head. It has none of the malice or greed dragons usually show. It looks like a dragon, but I can't see the likeness otherwise. Dahuang, slow down! Another voice called. The cook who had been preparing the creature's meals came hurrying over, chasing after an old dog-like figure. As soon as the pink thing noticed Dahuang, it turned its head away, padded over a few careful steps, nudged Dahuang gently with its snout, and then the 2, dragon and dog, sat side by side before Li Wei. My lord, the cook greeted, then hovered nearby, keeping an eye on them both. Li Wei nodded, stroking the dragon's head with his left hand and the dog's head with his right. Wait, he realized suddenly that the pink dragon wasn't incapable of gentleness. It had just behaved so differently around him. Why did it love to pounce on him so eagerly? He narrowed his eyes, but those clear, earnest eyes met his without guilt. Maybe it was a simple instinct, sensing strength and weakness. If it had leapt like that at Da Huang, the poor old dog might not have fared well. Against him, it was nothing. If it's not a dragon, then what is it? Thorin asked. Gandalf was lost for words for a moment, only feeling that the world continued to produce oddities. Da Huang barked once, pushing his face forward in an ingratiating way. The pink thing barked back, imitating him exactly. Is that a dog? Bard said, uncertain. It seems Master Bard needs to pay better attention, Gandalf replied dryly. Li Wei sighed. It's a dragon, but it's badly misbehaving in its learning. I'm thinking of sending it to school. At Li Wei's words, the pink dragon trembled all over, lowered its head, tucked its wings, and slunk away in a most pitiable fashion. The sight of a dragon trying to sneak away like a scolded puppy left everyone momentarily speechless. Da Huang followed obediently. The cook trailed after them like a guardian. Fascinating, Gandalf murmured, stroking his beard and watching the creature. A dragon of pure nature, yet a complete subversion of what we know. As a Maya who had witnessed the era of Morgoth, Gandalf knew dragons as they had been created, instruments of darkness, embodiments of greed and malice. Dragons were not merely dangerous beasts. Those traits were woven into their very being, their underlying nature. They hoarded treasure and delighted in ruin. This is something else entirely, he said. It may look like a dragon, but it is already a new species. Don't worry, Thorin, Bard, Li Wei added, nodding toward the dragon grazing on the turf. Sometimes creatures only look the part. Thorin still scowled. The memory of Erebor's fall ran deep. He could barely accept anything that resembled the enemy who'd taken so much from his people. Bard, however, was more composed. He glanced around and noticed that the people of Roadside Fort treated the pink dragon with easy familiarity. No one showed fear. They were tender around it. Bard's hatred of dragons didn't run as deep as Thorin's. His own ancestors had suffered, but Bard had never witnessed those horrors himself. Time blurs such things for humans more quickly, and what lingered as fresh grief for a dwarf could feel like history to a man. Time is cruel, Thorin said quietly, as if speaking to the years that had passed. Li Wei clapped both Thorin and Bard on the shoulders. Enough of the heavy talk. Today's a fine day in my domain. I'm planning a banquet and want to invite everyone in the territory. What do you say? Will you join us, gentlemen? Of course, Thorin said, straightening and bowing in a dignified manner. Thorin, at your service. Bard, at your service, Bard echoed. Gandalf huffed. What are you looking at? Do you expect an old man to bend his already troublesome back? He complained, offended at being left out of the earlier gentleman. You omitted me, Li Wei protested with a grin. That's a shame. Our tobacco here in Roadside Fort rivals the finest in the Shire. I had planned to share it with my wizardly friend, Thorin began. Oh, I was only teasing. Gandalf took off his hat and gave Li Wei a proper visiting bow. But, one thing, I've wondered since I arrived. What is that? He pointed up. Only then did Thorin and Bard follow his finger and notice a column of light shooting up from the castle, piercing the sky. They shaded their eyes and looked. A beacon, Li Wei explained. A magical device I set up a few years back. It grants nearby people blessings, healing, increased speed, even a boost to strength. I traveled far to acquire the materials for it, Li Wei added. Chapter 234, Celebration, beacons were no longer a rarity for Li Wei. Because he liked to wander, he had been to the Nether many times in recent years, and whenever he passed a Nether fortress, he'd cut down wither skeletons. The drop rate for their skulls was low, but he killed a lot of them. Even without actively hunting, casually carving them up whenever he encountered them had let him accumulate a pile over time. With wither skulls came nether stars, and when you have nether stars, you craft beacons. Before long, the castle was full of them, each one fashioned the moment he wanted it. Beacons had become a common item in Roadside Fort. Hospitals, squares, the barracks, any place that might need one had one, and most were fully upgraded. Still, despite the many beacons inside Roadside Fort, None had yet been placed in the territories beyond. If anyone asked why, it was simply because he'd forgotten. Apart from looking impressive, the greatest practical benefit of beacons was health regeneration. But ever since watermelon cultivation had spread and instant heal potions were produced in volume, both civilian and military needs could be met without the beacon's passive healing. It wasn't necessary, but having it was better than not. This gathering would be a good opportunity to mention the plan to the regional leaders and have them set beacons up. A celebratory banquet, Li Wei announced. News of the banquet spread through Roadside Fort and the territories covered by the Free City States, and preparations began everywhere. Li Wei waved his hand and granted several days' holiday. But before the celebrations, some gathered inside the castle to stare at the Nether Star, set beneath a glass dome behind the high seat. It was whiter than mithril, more dazzling than the best diamonds, flawless and pure. Each onlooker felt their breath catch. "I don't like to say this often," Thorin admitted after a few deep breaths, "but it looks even more perfect than the Arkenstone. Pure, flawless, radiant, and carrying a strange innate magic, this object, like a golden apple, fit the aesthetic of legend. Dwarves, elves, humans, even Gandalf couldn't help leaning in to study it. Had he not seen the Silmarils himself, he might have believed this was one. Of all the beautiful things I have seen, its light ranks only behind the glory of the two trees," he said, voice tinged with the distant memory of an older world. "Although that memory is faint. Thank you." Li Wei understood how weighty the praise was. It was nearly the highest compliment Gandalf could give. And on closer thought, the star was indeed marvelous. Some creations brought from the MC world were strikingly beautiful in a way that felt both extraordinary and oddly fitting in this world, like something out of fairy tales and legend. Allies were on their way. Bjorn, leader of the Beown clan, envoys from the elves, the wanderers, every faction who had received the invitation came to witness the event. "Ahem, sorry I didn't call ahead," Bjorn said sheepishly as he faced Li Wei's slightly stunned expression. "If my bees hadn't grown as large as human heads after feasting on cherry blossoms, I'd have thought you'd abandoned us," Li Wei teased. "Please forgive me. I've been rather busy," Bjorn muttered. Actually, Li Wei didn't fully believe him. The Beown clan's territory had only recently been declared under his care, and Li Wei had simply slipped up and overlooked sending a summons. "It's Bard's fault. He didn't remind me." Bard looked baffled. "What? All right, enough of that. Our other friends have arrived. I should go greet them." At the city gate, several elves were arriving on horseback, one after another. One was the deputy of the Woodland Realm, an elf whose horse Legolas had once stolen in Long Lake Town. "This shouldn't have fallen to me," the deputy sighed when greeted. Normally, Thranduil would send his son Legolas to represent him to show how much he valued the occasion. But Legolas was still wandering outside, and Thranduil was unwilling to leave the Woodland Realm, so he'd sent his deputy. Though the deputy's presence was usually understated, his position in the Woodland Realm was significant. He was among those first to receive the king's commands, so sending him was still a sign of respect. Soon after, elves from Rivendell arrived, led by Lord Elrond himself. Unlike Thranduil, who rarely left his forest, Elrond sometimes led expeditions to clear nearby orcs and was more active. Lately, ever since Roadside Fort's first batch of rangers had gone out on internships, he'd had fewer chances to stretch his legs. There simply weren't any orcs nearby. He'd used this event as an excuse to come see the beacon in person. He'd noticed the light years ago, but given the elves' long view of time and its apparently harmless nature, had delayed investigating. After greetings, Elrond and the Woodland Deputy went into the castle to meet Gandalf and the others. One of Elrond's guards stepped forward, and Li Wei's face brightened. "Ah, you're here too." "Long time no see, Agla," Li Wei said. "Lord Elrond asked me to accompany you," Agla replied with a knowing smile. Elrond had noticed the friendship between them and had lately entrusted tasks to Agla to encourage their meetings. Night fell, and fireworks shot into the sky, bursting into bright and colorful blossoms. Elves, dwarves, humans, and wizards gathered around banquet tables near the castle. The atmosphere was festive. "Thorin Oakenshield, your complexion is much improved since we last met." Elrond approached Thorin, swirled a goblet of roadside fort's specialty wine, and spoke with an expression that was more complex than his words. "Thank you, and you as well," Thorin replied stiffly. Seeing Elrond's look, he sighed and then barked, almost roaring, "You lot, come here." Those dwarves from the Lonely Mountain Expeditionary Force who always forgot to turn off auto pickup suddenly found themselves in trouble. "I knew I shouldn't have come," someone muttered as they lined up before Thorin like naughty children. "Do what you're supposed to do," Thorin said flatly. "Do I need to remind you?" "Sorry," one admitted. Then, led by that one, the others apologized in turn. "Remarkable," Elrond said, smiling sincerely. Dwarves acting so deferentially toward elves. Given the history between the two peoples, any historian would sooner believe pigs could fly than accept such a scene lightly. That the dwarves behaved this way owed something to Thorin's character and pride. He guarded the honor of his people fiercely. If he had seen such behavior in Rivendell in earlier days, he would have stopped it, even if he'd remained hostile to elves. Hostility aside, reputation and honor mattered. Elrond raised his glass to Thorin and the dwarves and drained it in one swallow. The rigid distance the two races had maintained for so long softened, if only for a moment. Gandalf watched from the side, smiling and nodding. Good, he thought. Truly good. Chapter 235, Peace and Bustle. Welcome, welcome. At the city gate, a late arrival huffed and laughed. I never used to travel at night, Leeway. Now I not only travel at night, I even dare to sleep on the roadside. Who would have thought I might wake up tomorrow with an extra blanket? It's lively tonight. Has it already started? Bilbo muttered as he slipped through the postern. He paused, struck by the night scene. Lanterns, laughter, the bright bustle pouring from the square beside the castle. He blinked like someone waking from a dream. It started a long time ago. You're the last to arrive, Leeway said, waving him on and indicating the square. They're all over there. Go see for yourself. Bilbo glanced toward the distant clusters of elves and dwarves and felt oddly unreal. Looks like they've made up. Perhaps, Leeway said with a small sigh. People used to tell me Thorin was the calmest and most reasonable of the dwarves, but on the expedition, many of his actions weren't exactly rational. It wasn't just about being reasonable. I think his longing to reclaim his homeland, centuries of anger and pressure, almost drove him mad, Bilbo replied. Now he's becoming more like a wise king, Leeway said, and a good friend. I agree. Bilbo nodded, then called as he strode toward the banquet table. Thorin, Bofur, Bifur, Bombur. Leeway closed the side gate and walked up the stairs along the wall, spotting a shadowed figure on the battlement. Aren't you going to find a place to relax for a while? He asked. I'm relaxing right now, came the voice from the dark. Falodon stretched and rose from the rocking chair. It's too bright down there. I can't even see the stars. Stars. Leeway let his gaze sweep over the sky, joining the eyes of several other rangers perched along the wall. They had no homeland. The prosperity below belonged to others. What mattered to them was the darkness beyond the wall, the stubborn struggle that had stretched through ages. Those stars are like the Star of Elendil, the treasure of the Dunedain. Unfortunately, it's been lost for thousands of years, like our homeland, Falodon said. You mentioned the Star of Elendil, Leeway interrupted, thoughtful. If he remembered right, the emblem of Arnor's kingship, a gem that looked like a pale white star, akin to the Evenstar, was now in Saruman's Orthanc. Saruman had found it long ago and kept it. He was selfish. Leeway made a mental note to speak with him about it when he could. I've picked up rumors about it before. Maybe I can help look. That would be appreciated, Falodon said with a tight smile, though he didn't sound hopeful. They had all grown used to a life without a home, without even spiritual rest. Even the Dunedain, who lived long lives, had watched centuries pass. Time might not erase their history, but it could numb the sharpest pain and show them what needed doing now. Leeway handed Falodon a glass of ice-cold honey beer. Want some? Falodon accepted it in silence and drank slowly. Many things in the world were broken, he thought, but there were always hands mending them, or at least stacking pieces back into place. You're here, a voice said from behind, startling them both. That's the trouble with elves, Falodon grumbled as he relaxed when he saw who it was. They walk without a sound and don't greet you. If this hadn't been the roadside fort, he might have tossed his glass and drawn his dagger. "Agra, you come at a good time," Fulodon said. Liwei waved. "We're stargazing. Tonight's sky is exceptionally clear." "Care for a drink?" Agra asked, raising his own glass. Of course. The three, Dunedain, Elf, and one who belonged somewhere between, stood side by side, watching the glittering firmament and sipping their wine. The quiet up on the wall contrasted with the louder revelry near the castle. "Again!" Gloin bawled at one of the long tables, slamming down a huge beer mug. "Once you drink it, no spitting allowed," he panted. "Of course. I cherish what I eat," the assistant of the woodland realm answered with a composed lift of his own cup, moving it with courtly grace. "Shall we continue?" "Damn, Elf. I'll have you out cold on the table," Gloin growled. Glass after glass clinked and emptied. The dwarves' mugs were piled high, then hauled away to make room for more. At last, after another barrel was carried off, Gloin's head lolled, and he collapsed on the table, snoring with a hiccuping farewell to his opponent. "You, Hick, why are you lying sideways?" The assistant of the woodland realm simply raised his head with an air of amused superiority, casually popping a grape into his mouth. "Dwarves, nothing more than that." The taunt was like striking a flint. The dwarves bristled. "I didn't want to get involved," Dwalin snarled, standing close by, then slammed a mug to his lips. "But since you said that, don't blame me." "Another round?" the assistant asked, stroking his goblet, utterly untroubled. As Thranduil's most capable advisor, he had the calm of long years and a constitution to match. He was no stranger to drink. The dwarves gathered, ready, blind fury and pride in their faces. "Watching kin fight alone will not do," someone murmured, as a few guards from Rivendell, brought by Elrond, slipped in and stood behind the Woodland Realm's assistant. It was an odd sight. The two houses of elves were not always close. In the last alliance, the first king of the Woodland Realm had clashed with the High King. The Woodland Elves had charged a battle early and paid with their lives. Many fell and became part of the Dead Marshes. Behind the calm of the wine and song lay old wounds. "Very well," the assistant said. The dwarves and elves burst into fresh competition, mug and cup raised high. When they finally drifted away, only Elrond and Thorin remained at a table. Their faces kept little of what each felt. Conversation between such leaders had its own careful distance. Fortunately, Bilbo arrived as if meaning to break that formality. "Bilbo, how have you been?" Elrond asked, gentle concern in his voice. "Thank you for your concern. As you can see, very well," Bilbo replied with a small grin. "That's good. Come to Rivendell anytime," Elrond said. "The gates of Erebor are always open to you," Thorin added, drawing Bilbo closer. The air between them was still fragile, but warmer tones were being found. Gandalf, passing by for more wine, looked at the three with a puzzled expression, and then decided it could wait. "Ha! I'm good at fireworks. Let me set them off," he announced, downing his cup and waving to the crowd. Laughter and cheers answered him. At a distance, Bjorn chewed on leaves and berries, watching the commotion. Beside him, Little Pink mimicked every bite. Bjorn chewed, Little Pink chewed. One opened his mouth, the other followed. For a moment, the two of them froze, staring at each other over their shared snack. Bjorn narrowed his eyes, then relaxed. "What? Not enough vegetables and fruits?" A resident called out loudly from the crowd. "This won't do. If others see it, they'll think we're starving here at Roadside Fort," someone added. "Bring out the stores. Empty the warehouse if you must." One box per person," a resident shouted, and hands began to move as generosity and the knight's good spirits spread through the square. Chapter 236, Breaking News. The wild winds scattered the songs of Roadside Fort. Whatever banquet or celebration had been underway had come to an end. The Woodland Realm's deputy woke with a start at the table, stood abruptly, and murmured, "I won." Around him there were no dwarves left standing, or any other elves. The hall lay silent, and the small joy that had sparked in him just moments before faded inexplicably. The dwarves had been strange, interesting companions, and looking at them now, he didn't know whether to feel glad or sad. He drew a deep breath and, unexpectedly, smiled. He understood a little better why his king refused to leave home. Only their own kind could keep elves company forever, kinsmen in the Black Forest, relatives in Rivendell, others of their race. "Time to go back," he said. He shook his head and walked toward the entrance of the Sky Road. "Wait a moment." a voice called. Gloin propped himself up on the table, barely lifting his head. "You're not bad, fellow," he mumbled. Hiccup, and he fell asleep again. The deputy stood for a long time and then continued toward the exit. "Hold on." This time Li called after him, waving. If it wasn't over, then it truly wasn't over. There was no reason to hurry. "Take this back. I think Thranduil will like it." Li produced a beacon. The deputy's breath caught. No one could refuse such a pure, beautiful crystal. All night long, the elves had kept saying, "Please let me gaze at the nether star in that beacon a little longer." If the dwarves admired the beacon for its craftsmanship, the elves were captivated by it. It resonated with their sense of beauty. Elves had always loved silver. Its color recalled the stars, and the first things an elf saw on waking were the countless lights of the heavens. The nether star was called so because it resembled those stars, purer and more beautiful, and, crucially, within reach. Faced with Liwei's casual gift, the deputy of the woodland realm didn't know what to do with his hands. He felt he should return and drag his king out to receive this personally. Li did not skimp on allies who had befriended him. He had plenty of these pieces, and he gave them freely, no conditions, no bargains. It was simply a gift. Rivendell, the woodland realm, and Erebor, the allies present, each received a beacon. Thorin half-joked he wanted to make it a royal treasure and embed it in the mountain wall behind his throne. Dig through the mountain. It must shine. The dwarves agreed with unanimous enthusiasm. For Elrond and Rivendell, the gift felt weighty in a different way. Such a magnificent thing would bring joy even to those in the blessed realm across the great sea, Elrond said. We shall remember this forever. Rivendell set up a beacon sanctuary. Elven artisans, drawing on ages of craft, refined every detail of its setting. They carved murals telling the beacon's origin and the name of the one who had presented it. The beacon itself sat on an obsidian base beneath a clear glass dome, and inside burned a nether star, pure and flawless, like a true sky star. It did not rival the three Silmarils or the light of the two trees, but it held a different, immediate beauty and a direct kind of power. When, at Liwei's instructions, layers of metal blocks were stacked beneath the beacon, its power revealed itself. The vitality it emitted slowed, and in some cases halted, the physical decline that afflicted elves. In Arda, elven bodies were slowly failing. Over ages they diminished, and those who refused the summons to the west risked losing their physical forms altogether, becoming invisible spirits. Most elves did not fear this. Many longed to sail west to the Blessed Realm, where decay would cease. But the Woodland Realm's elves, proud and reluctant to be led by the Noldor or to answer the Valar, chose to remain. Their resistance meant they faced extinction in a world already corrupted by Morgoth. The land and its matter were no longer as pure as when first made, and elven bodies were affected. The beacon offered another path, or at least a reprieve. Its vitality lengthened the time elves could endure in the world of Arda. When a beam from a beacon struck through the leaves of the Black Forest, Thranduil rose up, eyes wide. "I must go see Liwei," he said. He was no longer content to be a recluse. Liwei's act had altered the fate of elves in a delicate, profound way. "I just hope to spend more time with my friends," Thranduil added quietly. Still, not all welcomed the change uncritically. Some whispered that such aid might have been tampered with or manipulated. Skepticism and caution followed the gift, as well as gratitude. Far away in Erebor, Balin sat alone in the empty hall, tears in his eyes. "How could it be such a coincidence that I'm the one left here again?" he murmured. "I'm never playing with you lot again." The old dwarf with the white beard declared it with the stubbornness of his kind. Time washed things onward. That year, Liwei did not wander as he often did. He stayed within his territory and worked constantly, especially in the unnamed tower. He repaired, sorted, copied, and stored books by the cartload, replenishing shelves until the tower's library was vast beyond measure. No one could say how many books arrived, only that the tower's collection had become terrifyingly large. People began to call it the Tower of Knowledge. But Liwei did not remain shut away in the tower alone. He completed the nether highways from Roadside Fort to Gondor and from Gondor to Dale. Between those projects and the tower's refurbishment, he worked so hard he nearly exhausted himself, but he was happy. The Sky Road opened, and more people traveled it. Ancestral roots shifted, and the map of Middle-earth itself was subtly redrawn. The roads brought more than travel and trade. There was change in the air, and things were quietly brewing. The year passed without major incident. In the blink of an eye, a new year came. In 2948, a messenger arrived at Roadside Fort from Gondor with news from afar. Leeway opened the envelope and read the formal greetings. Then, tucked among the courtesy, a personal note. My first son has been born, and I have named him Theoden. He is lively, strong, cries loudly, and is a healthy child. If you have the chance, you must come and see him. Tap. After slipping the letter into a special sorting box inside the castle, Leeway rose and greeted the Gondor messenger waiting outside. I'll wait for you in Gondor. What? The messenger blinked. He didn't understand what Leeway meant by, I'll wait for you in Gondor. Perhaps it would only make sense once he returned to Gondor. From Roadside Fort to Minas Tirith, even on a fast horse, was at least 10 to 15 days' ride. He shrugged and let it go. Some mysteries, he thought, were better not chewed over. He took the advice to heart and did not dwell on it. After delivering the letter, he set about the second task Sengel had given him. Take a good look at Roadside Fort for me. What does that great city, rumored to be built by Leeway himself, truly look like? I want your account. It was a roundabout way of asking him to explore, to write a travelogue so those too busy to come could see it through his eyes. Stunning, the messenger reported later. Not less impressive than Minas Tirith. Perhaps only some lost cities of legend rival it. He described wide avenues where carriages moved constantly toward a new market by the Sky Road entrance, caravans bringing specialties and taking home goods from Roadside Fort, poets sitting on stones composing legends, travelers coming just to see the miraculous road. As people passed through, talk of the place spread across Middle-earth. Some even called it the center of the North, the capital of the free city-states, the birthplace of legends. While the Gondor messenger settled his horse and wandered in curiosity, Leeway had already slipped into the nether and stepped onto the high-speed passage. That same day, he arrived at the White City, the capital of Gondor. I didn't expect you to get here so quickly, Sengel said when Leeway found him. Leeway grinned. Seems those rumors about you, disappearing here and appearing far away the next moment, aren't unfounded. Don't be surprised. I just run pretty fast. Sengel shrugged as Leeway made a show of straightening his armor and stepped into the house. Sengel poked his head out of a doorway, looking around for the messenger he had sent. My messenger hasn't come back yet? He should still be in Roadside Fort. If you have anything to send, I can pass it on. No, I was hoping you would come with him. Sengel shook his head and closed the door. You'll have to wait a while for my messenger to return. Leeway scanned the room. You mentioned a son in your letter. Where is he? He'll be back soon. Moen took him out to sun in the back garden. No sooner had Sengel said it than the door creaked open, and Moen returned, carrying a lively little one in her arms. My son, she announced. Sengel's face brightened. He came forward and, with exaggerated gentleness, teased the baby with a finger. The firstborn, the youngest child, was clearly cherished. The cautious, almost timid care in his hands, careful not to scratch, made the man who had faced Uruk armies look oddly flustered. Don't worry, Moen said with a smile. He's not a girl. He'll grow into a strong warrior. You don't need to be so delicate. You're right. Sengel handed the child to Leeway. Come, let my son meet his uncle Leeway. Sengel coached nervously as he transferred the boy. Support his bottom with your left hand. Yes, like that. Loop your right arm around his back so his head rests in the crook of your arm. Yes, that prevents him from falling. Both men were sweating as they completed the handover. Phew. When the child was safely in Leeway's arms, the two of them exhaled at once. Theoden, delighted by the fuss, grabbed Leeway's index finger and kicked his tiny feet. After a minute of curious scrutiny, the baby tipped his head and sucked that finger clean. He might be hungry, Sengel said helplessly. Babies had their own rules. Theoden, having found a substitute for milk, settled against Leeway's chest, only to press his cheek against the dark netherite alloy of the armor, which carried a faint tang of old blood and rust. Everyone froze for a heartbeat, then burst into laughter at the absurdity. A little later, Moen took Theoden back inside, leaving Leeway and Sengel in the hall. I'm really looking forward to seeing him grow up, Sengel said, watching his wife disappear with the boy. When he towers over me, then my life may be complete, Sengel murmured. He will, Li Wei replied simply. He'll grow up healthy and have a good life. Sengel accepted the blessing with a contented smile. It's getting late. Your timing is perfect. Just yesterday, I went out and picked some fresh mushrooms, the same kind we had in Rohan on our last trip. This time, I've tweaked the recipe and the cooking method a bit. It should be a success. This time? Li Wei raised an eyebrow. Sengel grinned. Last time I made that dish for a certain gray wizard, Gandalf, you know him. Unfortunately, it wasn't cooked through. He fainted, fell asleep after drinking it, and didn't wake up for a day. But at least only he drank it, Sengel added with a careless chuckle, as if implying that was the best possible outcome. If Gandalf had been present and conscious, he thought, he'd surely have got a well-deserved clout on the head with his pipe. Chapter 238, Mushroom Soup and Gifts. When the smell of mushroom soup drifted through the room, if it could be called a smell, Li Wei felt his nose balk. Mo Wen emerged from her room, fed her child, put him to sleep, and after instructing the servants to keep a close eye on him, came out to check the stove. You're making that soup again? Yes. Mo Wen's expression was impossible to read. Sengel declared proudly, Li Wei taught me this, which made Mo Wen's look even stranger. Under that gaze, Li Wei felt as if something intangible had been taken from him, his reputation in some small way. Almost done, Li Wei said. Sengel rubbed his hands, eyes fixed on the pot where meat chunks and sliced mushrooms bobbed in the broth. He stared for a few more minutes, stirred the soup with a wooden spoon, and announced it was ready. He ladled the first bowl and handed it to Li Wei to taste. Li Wei studied the mushrooms and meat for a moment. They looked cooked, so that wasn't the worry. But what was that white stuff beside the mushrooms? Fat, thick, greasy, floating lumps. He glanced at Sengel, who watched him expectantly and even brought a tiny spoon. Li Wei muttered to himself, if it's greasy, so be it. How bad could it be compared to Erebor's oily barbecue sauce? Just as he lifted the spoon, he caught another look, Mo Wen shaking her head behind Sengel, urgently pointing at the bowl and waving him away. Don't drink it, she seemed to say. Li Wei shot her a sideways glance to reassure her. He'd eaten rotten meat and maggoty bread before. What could this do? He took a cautious sip. The soup hit his tongue and everything froze. He should have seen it coming. He closed his eyes, forced himself to swallow, and then opened them again, feeling ruined by taste in a way he rarely had. Mo Wen had understood Sengel a lot better than he had. He glanced at his status bar out of reflex. No HP loss, no poisoning, just an indescribable, offensive flavor. How is it? Sengel asked, face full of the pride of an apprentice showing his first proper dish to his master. He was older and had finally found something to throw himself into. Li Wei could not be the one to crush him. It's fine, Li Wei managed, a strained, insincere comment. Very few people got him to lie so obviously. Drink more, there's plenty in the pot. Sengel, ignoring how hot the pot was, reached for it as if to carry the whole thing over. Li Wei hurriedly blocked him. Stop. What's wrong? Sengel looked puzzled. Never mind, Li Wei said, but Sengel protested mildly. I actually already ate before this. I'm not very hungry. Sorry I didn't say so earlier. That one bowl is enough. All right. Sengel seemed a little disappointed but recovered quickly. He served himself a bowl and happily ate it. Li Wei poked at his soup with the spoon, forcing small talk and a dry laugh, unable to bring himself to take another bite. When Sengel polished off his bowl and went back for another, Mo Wen pointed toward the trash disposal. Li Wei understood and, without hesitation, poured his soup down the drain. Finished? Sengel turned, noticing Li Wei's empty bowl. Li Wei's hand froze. Yeah, finished. Sengel reached reflexively for Li Wei's bowl, then drew his hand back when Li Wei's expression stiffened. I'll get you another bowl, he offered, then stopped. No, you don't need to. If I want more, I'll help myself. Sengel's face flickered with a strange look as he withdrew his hand. The awkward meal ended on that note. Li Wei didn't linger, especially not at mealtimes. He worried about what would happen if Sengel decided to make another batch of chef's special and insisted Li Wei try it again. Better to let him enjoy his culinary experiments alone. Before he left, Li Wei took out the item he'd brought. It was an amulet on a cord, a gold frame set with a green gem that shimmered with a faint magical glow. "I give this amulet to Theoden," he said, offering it forward. "It can protect the wearer from external attacks, swords or spells." Li Wei explained, "Of course, it has limits. When the gem's glow fades, the amulet's power is spent. If that happens, you can send it to Roadside Fort and I can re-enchant it so it will work again." Sengel handled the amulet carefully, holding it up to study the gem. The stone felt like earth condensed, a grounded, solid presence. The amulet carried the power of the earth. Emergency Shield Amulet. It was the same model as the one Li Wei wore. It granted 7 points of shield, and when that first shield broke, it immediately provided another 7 points. Hence, emergency. 14 points total, enough to turn a lethal blow into a survivable wound. More importantly, the rune-bound shield was geared to resist magical force as well as physical strikes, the very property that had allowed Li Wei to counter the ringwraiths. If it could dampen that kind of dark power, it could help against many hostile sorcerers as well. Sengel gripped Li Wei's shoulders with both hands, eyes shining with gratitude. "I will remember this friendship," he said earnestly. "This gift will always accompany my child." Li Wei forced a smile, and as he walked away, thought to himself, "Time to get some new stuff." Chapter 239, Tower Hills. After delivering the gift, Li Wei didn't linger. He turned back toward his territory by the crossroads and resumed his excavation and renovations. He had a habit of building, a tall tower in Roadside Fort, a highway in the Nether, a bunker in Gondor. It seemed his life was meant for construction. He had also established an outpost in Gondor, open to Gondor rangers and soldiers, to civilians seeking refuge, and to passing travelers. There was only one rule. Everyone who used the resources had to consciously maintain the environment, treating everything inside the territory as if they were guests in someone else's home. Word of the outpost spread like a legend. Aside from the rangers and Gondor soldiers who knew of it and checked in regularly, desperate people sometimes tried to find the safe haven between Gondor and Mordor, clinging to hope. "I finally found it," they would whisper to themselves. On the north side of Ithilien, Li Wei lay in the grass, picking a few mushrooms from a rotten log. Perfect, these were the ones. He tossed them into his pack and sighed in relief. "I need to go back and make a proper mushroom soup myself," he said, half to himself, wanting to reclaim the honor of a chef. "Aha! Look what we've found. Careless mushroom picker." A voice cut across the field, and Li Wei sat up, glancing back. 7 or 8 Uruks were staring at him from a distance. They took a collective step forward, then fell back when they read the expression on his face. The leader brightened and hurried forward. "Sir, I know where to find the mushrooms you're picking. I can bring more to you." "You'd better," Li Wei said. "I do. I really do." They ran off. After what amounted to the time it takes to pour a teacup, one Uruk returned, carefully setting down the pile of mushrooms he'd brought. "See? These are them." "Get out. Leave this land," Li Wei commanded. He'd left the area a year ago, and orcs and Uruks had been rare then. Now, after a year, these fellows were back up to no good. Yes, we'll go right away." They hurried off. Perhaps the area would remain peaceful a little while longer, though he knew it wouldn't last forever. Li Wei looked across at the scorched plains and the blackened mountains opposite, rubbed his chin, thought for a moment, then shook his head and turned for the White City. The next day at noon, in Sengel's home, a pot of mushroom soup simmered on the stove. "This is how mushroom soup should taste," he declared. Li Wei tasted it with obvious satisfaction. It was exactly right. Sengel's earlier attempt had made him doubt himself. Now he grinned and said, "Forgive me, maybe I judged too soon." When Moen tried a spoonful, she looked surprised. "So this is what it's supposed to taste like. It's a little better than mine." Sengel nodded. "Noted." "Perfect. There's been little on the front lines lately, so I can relax. I'll make this several more times over the next few days until I've got the recipe perfect." Moen's face hardened. "You can drink all of it yourself. Too much mushroom soup isn't good for a child's growth." "That's a shame," Li Wei replied. Sengel, disappointed, reached for the bowl in front of Moen. "Then this one." "No." Moen protected her bowl. "Just this once." All right, Sengel conceded. Another stubborn food guard. The visit to Gondor was brief. When the messenger Sengel had sent returned, Li Wei set off again. He rarely stayed in one place. Since he was already traveling, why not visit more? The day after he returned to Roadside Fort, he left west for Linden. Years earlier, Círdan of Linden had invited him as a guest, but Li Wei had continually forgotten. From an elf's perspective, the passage of years meant little. Even if he came 10 years later, Círdan would have barely noticed. The people were used to his comings and goings. Elsewhere, that pattern would not have worked. Territories need management, relationships require tending, and decisions about development must be made. That was especially true for a place like Roadside Fort, which had exploded into prominence and become the northern center in just a year. But Li Wei's territories were different. Because of the lord at their center, the high level of education, and almost limitless material resources, they didn't require constant oversight. There were no open or hidden power struggles, no bitter conflicts of interest, only technical issues, outdated methods, or areas that could be improved. As things stabilized and a younger generation replaced the old, people's outlooks shifted. They no longer measured life by food, warm clothes, and a roof. They aimed farther and higher, following their lord's example of combining the mysterious and sacred with approachability and kindness. A breeze rippled the tender green grass. Small white flowers speckled the hills. The bright meadows rolled, and on a high ridge, several white towers rose into the sky. West, in Eriador, on a high hill between the Shire and the Grey Havens, Li Wei rode slowly forward, silhouetted on horseback. He had arrived at Tower Hills. Since the beginning of the Second Age, this site had been an elven outpost, and many tall white towers had been built there. The tallest, LOTR, housed a special seeing stone. But that stone was peculiar. It couldn't communicate with other stones, nor could it be used to look over Middle-earth. Its only purpose was to show the Blessed Land, Aman, the realm of the Valar. Elves came on pilgrimage to glimpse a sliver of that holy beauty. Guards stood in front of a LOTR where the stone was kept. As Li Wei approached, a hesitation flickered across their faces. The vision of the Blessed Land was sacred and inviolable. Elves were prepared to persuade outsiders to leave. Yet when they looked at him, there was something that gave them pause. "Greetings," they said. The guards at the foot of the tower were the first to greet him. Chapter 240, A Distant Gaze. Hello. Li Wei dismounted and tied his horse to a post at the base of the tower. Li Wei, Lord of Roadside Fort, has come to visit. We know of you. Your deeds in recent years are like a summer storm, impossible to ignore, known to every elf who lives here. The elf standing before the tower inclined his head. May I ask the purpose of your visit? May I see the Stone of Seeing? Li Wei asked. The elf hesitated. I am sorry, I cannot make that decision. Li Wei had expected as much. The elf's reluctance was not a rebuke, but prudence. The stone was no ordinary artifact. It was a sacred relic that could look straight to the Blessed Realm. Even if Sauron one day held this place, he might not dare touch the stone if the Valar chose to glance back. A single glance from those powers beyond could be ruinous. Li Wei understood his own limits well enough. He could not yet sink continents. The Valar could, and that was only one aspect of their might. Some commanded earth and mountains. Some commanded the seas. Some ruled over life, over plants, over souls, or even over the very breath of the world. Others were warlords whose full wrath could crack mountains and unmake coasts. For the safety of the world, the upper extremes of divine power had been restrained. The great, world-shattering beings were no longer seen. Instead, the world knew Maya like Gandalf and Saruman, subtle, wise, occasionally martial, notable in spirit rather than in cataclysmic display. Power in this world was not only measured by raw force, wisdom, craft, imagination, inspiration, these were also power. Even if one's combat strength was modest, excellence in those other realms could make one mighty. Li Wei, for all his earthly limitations, had more of that breadth than most. He was in many ways a creator. Not all gods had to be titans. If he had taken a few more steps, perhaps he would have outgrown this world entirely. For now, he smiled, stepped back, and did not press the issue. He had come on a whim to look. If he could glimpse Valinor through the stone and satisfy his curiosity, so much the better. If not, then so be it. Please come in, a new voice said. As Li Wei turned toward his horse, the great door swung wide and another elf stepped out. Li Wei blinked. The elf was unfamiliar, perhaps the tower's guardian. You may go up, the elf said gently, and then smiled and stepped aside, inviting him in. Thank you, Liwei replied, and followed him into the White Tower. They climbed to the top. When the Stone of Seeing stood before him, the Guardian fell back into the doorway and left Liwei alone with it. The stone was as dark as the night sky, flecked with tiny points of light. The scene within shifted and flowed, sea, sky, and then something beyond the firmament, white shores, rolling green lands, and a rising sun. A harmony of color and light filled Liwei's eyes. As the view drew back, he saw the high tower of Avalon, the master stone there, aligning with this one, allowing sight across the waters. After Numenor sank, Valinor had been removed from this world to prevent future ruin. Only those given leave could reach it by the straight road, otherwise there was only ocean. The stone tugged his gaze past the tower, over the pass behind it, and across a golden land where tall, wondrous things grew. Cities rose in beauty and prosperity, and elves dwelt openly in their perfection. Rocks, trees, and waters there were holy and unblemished. Life knew no blight nor decay, things endured. Great halls stood upon the land. There, in Liwei's heart, he knew instinctively, were the dwellings of the Valar. His sight drifted higher, over pastures and forests and mountainside rivers, across gardens that seemed to hold some memory of perfection, reaching the very edge of the world to a serene hall beside the walls of the world. There was no bustle there, only a quiet, open space in which a lament sang, sorrowful, yet suffused with peace and hope. The music touched Liwei. He felt a swelling of feeling, a warmth that was almost prayerful. Corruption %. Suddenly, the stone dimmed. When it brightened again, the image had changed. No longer was Valinor's unmarred beauty on display, but scenes of Middle-earth's old hardships, sorrow, battle, death, the echoes of regret. The view shifted yet again, and Liwei's pupils narrowed, now on his own lands, Roadside Fort, the Bayonne clan in the Anduin Valley, Dale, Long Lake Town, Grand Road Town. Life there was thriving, people laughing, working, yearning, full of hope. Simply looking filled him with honest joy. A pair of compassionate eyes watched him from within that vision, still wet with tears. In that instant, Liwei understood who had been looking. Nienna, the weeper among the Valar, the one who taught Gandalf compassion and patience. From her, Gandalf had learned to listen to sorrow and to use power to lift burdens and rekindle hope. He had learned the same lesson from her, in his own way. A smile touched Liwei's face. The image faded. The stone's light dimmed, then steadied. There was no revelation, no voice, no dialogue, only that brief, mutual glance. Whatever being in Valinor had allowed itself to look had done so and withdrawn. The moment was over. Liwei bowed to the guardian of the White Tower and, mounting his horse, rode on westward toward the Grey Havens.